Perfect, and we are good to go.
Good morning, everyone. It is June 24th, 2026, and I will call this meeting of the Early Learning Council to order. Gabby, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Chair Farrar Campbell is present. Katie Brooks is just running a little bit late, but she will be here. Peter Buckley,
Here.
Robin Hill Dunbar,
Here.
Eric Hunter. Oh, there he is. Dr. Peg Miller,
Here.
Subin O.
Here.
Perfect. Ruby Ramirez is excused, and Marie Simons.
Here.
Perfect, and we have a quorum, Chair.
Wonderful. Well, we are going to kick off this morning with a update from Jonna Timms in the governor's office. Give us a little update on, I think, the roundtable and anything else you want to share with us. It's always great to see you, Jonna.
Good
Welcome.
morning. Thank you so much. Good morning, Liz. Good morning, directors and members of the Early Learning Council. Happy to be with you this morning. I wanted to just give you a little bit of an update on what's been happening in the early child see if I can do this right. Early Child Care and Learning Systems Roundtable. Quite a mouthful there. And answer any questions that you may have, and then go on to other things that are happening in our world of early childhood. So I want to also just give Liz, Robin, Carrie the opportunity to chime in. They know this work as well as I do, and let you know that we stood up this roundtable. Governor asked. It started in March of this year. Our meetings are monthly. They used to be 90 minutes. We realized that very quickly that we had way too much work to do in 90 minutes. So they moved to 2 hours. Still not quite enough time, but we're managing. And we have rolled this out in phases. We've talked about before, 3 phases. We're in phase 1 right now. That will go through early September of this year. And we started our work in April, well, started in March, getting to know each other, laying out the charge and our charter. And then in March and April, talking about what it meant to really be universal. And then giving an overview of all of the public programs that are offered in our state. So, overview of Preschool Promise and OPK, of ERDC and Baby Promise. In May, we had a really, I think, robust conversation, one of the most robust ones that we've had so far around family access and those pathways that we need to really shore up and improve for our families. In June, we talked about the workforce. One of the charges in phase 1 has been what are we doing right now to really support and improve the system with the resources that we have. And so we've been a little bit careful to not go too deep into some of the issues around funding, really wanting to look at, as I said, what we have with our resources that we have now. One of the biggest things that came up, as I'm sure you understand, and our members took it on really clearly and responsibly, was around compensation of the workforce. And even though knowing that we need to look at what we have to work with currently, not being afraid to say, and we've got some really deep issues in the area of compensation, and we need to address them. So we talked about compensation in June, and along with the workforce. In July, we'll be talking about facilities and infrastructure, what we have, what it takes to improve and expand that infrastructure. And then August, we'll talk more about DELC as a governance and systems support and how DELC can operationally work more efficiently and really support the system as a whole. So I'll stop there for a minute. Carrie, Robin, Liz, anything else you want to add?
Well, I think you really covered it, Jonna. I wondered if you could share any more, and I am happy to as well, about the approach of listening, the listening sessions that
Yes.
CI.
That's part. Yep, that's part of my next. Thank
Oh.
you. I'll pay you the $5 I owe you when the next time I see you. You teed that up beautifully. Moving on, wanted to talk about. Well, you know what? Before I go to there, Robin, let me talk about sort of how we've been getting some of our information currently. So, in every meeting, we start out with what we call a spark. And big thanks to Harriet, who I just see just joined us. Y'all, like, I seriously, I could not get through just the background inner workings of making all of this come together without Harriet and the clear and organized way she thinks. The way she keeps us on track, all of those good things. So it was Harriet's great thought that we needed what we call a spark at the beginning, and that is someone who from the roundtable, but also now we're moving outside the roundtable a little bit, who are resources that sort of are hands-on experts, folks who are living and have some lived experience around that work that we're discussing at the beginning of every meeting. So they sort of tee us off with their experience, with their lived knowledge around that about the information that we've been that we're going to be getting into during the meetings, and then. We also have been using a tool called a Mentimeter that was just recently introduced to me through the CI team that really allows for engagement and interaction. It's a tool that can be used for prioritization and polling and those kinds of things. So we get a really good sense of what people are thinking. I'm going to, if it's okay with y'all, share my screen for just a moment. If I can find where it is. Oh, there it is. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Nope. Okay. Give me a second. Is it there now? Okay. Peter's saying no. Oh, it's because you know why? I haven't hit share. Let me try that. Let me try that now. Does that work?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Wonderful. Oh, technology. Thank you. I'm showing my age, y'all. So just this is an example of some of the things that have come out of using a Mentimeter, come out of the work that we've been discussing. So we have come together with some policy ideas. This specifically was in May, talking really about our family access and what we needed to really be looking at as policy ideas around that. So as you can see, it really allows us to think about what people think are the most important, rate and look at how some of those things rise to the top. And have more energy, as we've been saying, but at the same time, and Harriet always reminds us that we still have to make sure that we gather all of the ideas and give space and breath to all of our ideas. So these were just some that sort of had energy that rose to the top, but we will be publishing all of the ideas, policy ideas that have come out of that. So wanted to just give you a sense of what that looks like. Marie.
Thank you so much, Jonna. I had a quick question about this, and maybe it's in one of your other policy ideas, just maybe they're not reflected here, but I wondered if you could talk any about how the roundtable has been bringing in business ideas to the table. And I think I'm asking this from the lens of childcare businesses, not so much as businesses who are looking for their workforce to have childcare. But we do know that I think, if I'm not wrong on the data, the majority of the sector is run through private businesses, small or medium sized in-home providers. And so I'm wondering how you're thinking about childcare as a business to ensure, I know you talked about workforce, which maybe you're sort of one and the same, but like the system we have set up in our state for certain childcare businesses isn't a profitable model. And so I'm wondering how you're thinking about that.
I love that question. I think that aligns really with what we're thinking about for our next policy conversation around infrastructure. So we have Heidi Hagelbraid, who is from the Children's First Finance. She's a national person who works, and they have a Oregon office here as well, who really works with small business, specifically childcare. So hopefully we'll be hearing some from her. We've got John Tapania from Oregon, from OBC, Oregon Business Council, who also sort of brings a business lens. So I appreciate you uplifting that, because I think we have not delved deeply into that yet, and it is a topic to come. Let's see, Carrie, Robin, Harriet, Liz, anybody else want to have anything else to add around that?
And maybe
I was going to just add that there is representation from those small businesses on the roundtable.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what I mean by that is, we've got registered family, certified childcare centers. Like, these are the buckets that exist that businesses can operate under. And we know that through both experience and modeling, there are certain of those buckets that just aren't profitable in rural areas, that can't make it because of the financing. So I guess that's the real business lens I was hoping is a part of your conversation, is that, we can even have infrastructure like a building that's built in a rural place, but the operational costs associated with providing the childcare needed are higher than the revenue that can be received both from ERDC, Baby Promise, all the programs that are out there. There's still not enough revenue to operationalize that bucket. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of businesses. I'm hoping there can be some conversation about how, how to make sure that our buckets that exist, we've done some cost modeling to ensure that in all places in Oregon, there's the ability for people to start those businesses and therefore create that childcare that's needed for the communities.
Marie, may I reach out to you and spend some time getting a little bit more information and thoughts around how we best uplift that?
Glad to.
Okay. All right. So,
Abby, would you introduce us in email? Thank you so much.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Thank
John,
you so much,
I
Gabby.
also want, John, I also wanted to flag this is top on our mind, Marie, and we're using PTG funding to do some updated cost modeling and these issues around cost versus price, right? Like, a lot of our ongoing work has been what it's the prices people are charging versus what's the cost in the operation. So there's more to come that can then feed into policy solutions that we need in Oregon.
Great. And I should have mentioned that, because what I should have mentioned is what I love about this work and having delved so deeply into it, and frankly just Carrie so deeply into it, is not only are we getting the focus and thought and expertise from the roundtable themselves. We also have the work that's happening on the DELC side with the PDG grant, with DELC as a whole agency, and Carrie is sort of spanning both of those things. So she's sort of the liaison that lets us know where we need to go with more information, with what's happening, but where, so the right hand knows what left hand is doing and discussing. So we have been lucky to be somewhat comprehensive in that sense. But Marie, I will make sure that Gabby will introduce us, and I'll reach out. Okay. Thank you, Subin.
Hi. I'll just start with appreciation that this conversation is even happening in our state, and the focus and the attention across all the constituents that are there and representing. So so excited. My question is similar to Marie's in that, earlier this year, the council has spent a fair amount of time looking into other states and learning about how they kind of address things. And I had the same question you had, Marie, which is I can't remember the exact state, but they really looked at the business model of early childhood and in their words, fixed it. And so I do think there's work to do there. The other two things that I kind of took away from earlier council meetings was one, there was a long and intentional and strategic process to make sure the broader business community was involved and participating in the conversations, and not necessarily early childhood people coming in with an ask, right? But making sure it's a win-win and understanding the perspective of what these kind of what other business communities are really seeking, and how it could be aligned. And then the third thing that I kind of picked up from earlier meetings was I don't know if this is just a comms issue, but it's really a policy thing. I'm thinking about Vermont and the 10-year plan that they put together to build the political will to get we're gonna get taxes, we're gonna do this, and we're all gonna be excited about it. I'm thinking about how we can get there.
Yeah, I love that. So I love that. Thank you. One of the things that we are going to be doing and you'll see this before it actually goes live to the public, but we're going to have a report that comes out of this first phase that will also include the recommendations that we are sending directly to Governor. I would love to talk about, we have not even, frankly, talked about that yet. And I think you're right. I think we need to be talking about it. I think we need to be talking about it early, and we need to be really in partnership with the folks that, with everyone that, as you said, we want to get excited about it. So interestingly, I just was on a panel with Cully Thornlad, who is one of our co-chairs at Social Venture Partners last Friday. And they had really doubled down in supporting preschool for all, and have continued to do granting and supporting of small business, all of those things. They are moving into their next strategic plan. And they said, one of the questions that they asked the panelists was, what would you see as something that we could take on? And one of the things I uplifted, I thought was really important, is this really collaborative, hand-in-hand thing, supports with business. And that may be also a place to really reach out beyond that, you all as council members, that we as the state can do, is reach to our partners and start to really think about those plans around, in 2027, releasing a 10-year plan, and working with, we have quite a few organizations, philanthropy, who always want to know, how can we support without having to, give money directly to government entities, right? So like maybe we talk to them about a support with public relations or public affairs firm or communications firm to help do some type of long-term comms planning. So I love that, Subin, and I wrote it down. Let's talk more. Let's see, Carrie, Liz, Robin. I think we lost Harriet for a moment. Anybody else wanna? I promise, Robin, I'm getting to your engagement part, and I know I want to make sure that I'm also using your
Sorry, I have one more
kind time.
One more question, Jonna, and I just
Yeah.
wondered if you could speak to what do you expect or what do you anticipate to be the outcome? I mean, I know that there's going to be a suite of recommendations.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to be on the task force in 2020 for
great.
affordable and quality childcare, which was great. We also produced recommendations. There were some things that came out of that, but I'm pretty sure there was a little bit of a crosswalk done between.
Yes, there was, and we never. This is the thing I feel really strongly about. When work is done, we don't put it on the shelf, right? So we do have those recommendations.
So I'm sure, I mean, there are some pretty, there's some bold recommendations in there.
There are.
Being, real candid. So I'm just curious what you're anticipating seeing at the end of this process. How is it bleed into the 2027 legislative session?
Yeah.
29, like what does it look like?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing was we really wanted to assess the system that we have. And strengthen that. And so what these recommendations are for is what may be needed in a legislative concept or other policy levers that we can pull in the next biennium that will get us seated on our road, right? And I say policy levers because legislative concepts are important, and we may have some, but there are some things that we can just do because they're good policy and because of the work of the Department of Early Learning and Care. And I think sometimes we forget that. One of the things I consistently say to Carrie will laugh when I say this out loud. I consistently say to the folks in my portfolio is when they say, well, the system, I'm like, we are the system. We're the system. So there are some things, as I said, we can pull as a policy lever just because we are the system. So we're going to be looking at that, looking at through those recommendations, what legislative concepts may need to be drafted that go forward, and we will all bring those to the Early Learning Council before they are put out as a full draft. And then in phases 2 and 3, I really envisioned somewhat of what Subin just talked about, which is what is our long-term plan for hitting universality in all 36 counties, whatever that looks like, because we have really, we're going to have more robust conversations about what is universal. And then how we expand more slots for our 0 to 2-year-olds. And we've had some really interesting things come forward on that. One of them that continues to sit with me, because it's expensive, but there's something just so exciting to me about it. And that is, since Oregon does have family leave, is there a way to do something so that folks who want to and need to have their kiddos in and center in family homes from 0 to 2 can do that and have the slots to do that. And it's affordable. But also, is there a way that folks can stay home with their 0 to 2 if they choose to do that? So it's I know that's a big one, and I just bring it up because I want to illustrate to you that we really are talking about what our realities are very clearly, but also what our dreams should look like as well, and not discounting the fact that just because they're big and just because they do have a price tag to them that we're not gonna talk about it. So does that help clarify a little bit, Marie, about where we're going? Okay. I see Ben just jumped on, so I want to make sure I'm using my time. Sorry, Ben. You know me. I'm a talker. I go over. Let me go to what Robin was talking about, which is our engagement plans. We know that it's important that we hear from our great experts, that we hear from you, but also that we want to make sure that there is opportunities to hear from folks far and wide in our state around what they want to see as the next steps and improvements in the system. So CI has graciously sort of taken the lead to do some engagement, some public engagements. They are starting out with 8 listening sessions. They are both 4 in English, 4 in Spanish. They're doing them in a couple of different parts of the state. So that is happening now through the end of July. And then also For All Families, Oregon has also taken on the opportunity to meet with some of their constituents to do some listening sessions, and then Delk is also doing some surveying of folks. So we're hoping that we are covering. We know we're not going to get to everyone, but covering a wide enough swath of folks in this first phase to get some really good feedback on some of the policy options and directions that are most important to folks. We are going to be continuing the, one other group is also doing listening sessions, and that is our regional solutions. So you know that in every region of the state, the governor has staff. They're called regional solutions. They will be doing some work with their counties and their listening sessions with their county folks around what the folks they work with are thinking in these areas. And then we're going to be continuing this in phase 2 and 3. We will have a more fleshed out plan on what it will continue to look like. There will be a survey, more generic question survey that we're going to be putting up on the website that people can just click on and answer. So if you have suggestions, thoughts, please do not hesitate to reach out to either Carrie or Liz or Robin to let them know, and we will get some things set up in either your part of the state or with a constituency that you think is important. I just put in the chat a link to a registration. It is the Children's Institute listening sessions. They did one on Tuesday. The rest will be in July. So feel free to look through that information as well. 9:31. See, Ben, I only went over by 1 minute. but I still can take, Ben has graciously said to take my time. So, um, I can take any more questions that you all have.
Any questions for Jonna?
Well,
Lots of hearts.
Thank you. Well, if you will be kind enough to invite me back again, I can let you know in your next meeting or your next couple of meetings where we're going on sort of we spent all this time on the roundtable, but where we're also going from the governor's perspective of priorities, looking at, we're deep into GRB, governor's recommended budget, working with DELC on their agency recommended budget as well. So would love to spend some time with you all and talk through some of that. And I can do that whenever you invite me back.
Yeah, I was going to say we're taking a break over the summer, but our retreat is coming up in October, and we will be in the Portland area, so we would love to put you on that agenda.
I would love to be there. I would love to be there, and happy to do that. Also, do like a preview in September. That September, October is really the perfect time because that is when everything is getting inked. Right now, we're still working in pencil, but everything is getting inked, and we'll have a better sense. Peter.
Thanks. John, is there any discussion, the Child Care Infrastructure Fund?
Yes. Good question. Yes. That is on our list.
Great.
So we, Governor has been very, we know that it wasn't enough. We know that there's more need, and we also know that it did some really important things. So that is on our list to be asking for those bonds again.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, y'all. I'm going to bounce out and wish you a lovely meeting.
Thank you so much, Jonna.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next time. All right. Okay, so we are going to move on to a talent assessment report overview, and we'll welcome Director Ben Cannon from HEC. And I was actually just in a meeting yesterday with the CCR&Rs completely talking about workforce, and it just reminded me we can't do any of this that we want to do for children and families if we don't have early childcare providers, if we don't have home visitors, if we don't have infant mental health specialists, all of those things, we just can't do that work. And so I'm really eager to hear about what HEC has found with this latest talent assessment. And so, Ben, I will turn it over to you. Welcome.
Well, thanks. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Let me know if there are any issues with that. I've been having a little bit of microphone and camera trouble over the last week. Well, appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with the council this morning. We, as you know, that the HEC has both a very broad purview relative to Oregon higher education and workforce development, and in some ways a very shallow purview, right? So we are broadly construed and authorized coordinating commission that touches a lot of institutions and programs and funding streams that are intended to address and support a workforce for a diverse set of industries and occupations. So I'll present some of the way that we approach that through research and strategy with a specific focus on the recent talent assessment and, of course, the early learning workforce. Really pleased to be joined by Jennifer Rice from HEC, so welcome her to join us on screen, since she, for our agency, has the most subject-specific or sector-specific understanding of our relationship to the early learning workforce and the early learning workforce generally. Thank you, Gabby or staff, for projecting the slides. You've been generous with the time you set aside on your agenda this morning. I'm free for the entirety if it's needed, and I expect that my presentation will not take up even the majority of the time that you've set aside. So welcome the conversation that may follow. We can talk about issues of higher education and workforce that are broader than the ones that we present here, or try to dig into the early learning specific findings. I'm also happy to let you, accelerate the rest of your agenda if we don't end up needing the full time. All right, turn to the next slide. Just give you a sense of what we'll cover here over the next few minutes. So, mentioned, and the chair mentioned, this recent report, biannual report, our talent assessment, that talks about a lot of different issues in talent and workforce development, but I'll focus on the findings related to the early childhood workforce. Describe some recent trends related to degree and credential production for early learning professionals. Talk about how some of the specific programmatic ways, and in particular through our student child care grant, that the HAC is involved in supporting child care and the workforce. And shift in the final portion of this to a little bit more of a focus on our relationship with local workforce boards, the way that our funding and grants that we administer attempt to support a better educated and better supported early childhood workforce. All right, next slide. So starting with this talent assessment, a few slides on this, and actually, maybe we'll take these in a slightly different order. Yeah, actually, if you could go to the next, I'm sorry, Gabby, I'm gonna yeah, try to trip you up here. Yeah, we'll start here. So the talent assessment at its heart, it looks broadly at the workforce needs of Oregon, and it is produced on a biennial basis by the HAC through contractors. We've used different folks over the years. I think we're in our fourth or fifth iteration of these assessments, and they attempt to identify where we have talent gaps, talent opportunities. This year's report took a particular focus on identifying and establishing a methodology for identifying programs, education and training programs that are linked to high demand, high skill, high and higher wage occupations in support of the HAC's responsibility to work with the governor in launching the new federal workforce Pell program for Oregon. So some of what you're going to sort of pick up on these slides is the emphasis that this talent assessment took to identifying credentials and programs that are eligible or could be eligible for the new federal workforce Pell program. These are intended to be short-term training programs. So, as our contractors looked at the landscape here, identified that, beyond the childcare, no surprise to this council, is a major challenge in workforce space, both in terms of, we'll talk about preparing professionals, but also for students, learners trying to access jobs and training for jobs. Childcare is a big need. And childcare, clearly an issue that weakens the pathway from education to career. Again, this is all very familiar to you. You know the importance of childcare for supporting workers generally in occupations and in careers, as well as in preparing for careers. Found that Oregon should expand access to childcare related supports that help workers start and complete training or employment. So just big picture backdrop before we even focus on the childcare workforce itself. Recognizing the importance of childcare as an industry to Oregon's broader economic and workforce needs, right? So this is not just good in its own sake, right? Because we care about preparing workers for early childhood careers, but good for all the other careers that we're trying to prepare Oregonians for, because of the relationship or the needs for childcare for so many of our learners. Okay, let's shift to the next slide. So go on to slide number, yeah, we'll go ahead. So to slide 6, I think is where we're gonna, no, my when I look at go back, one. Yeah, there we go. I'm sorry. Again, childcare, early childhood education, foundational Oregon's economy, the work that makes all other work possible. Yeah, the sector faces persistent capacity constraints, staffing shortages, and entry-level roles. So again, this report reinforces what the council already recognizes, I'm sure, which is the undersupply of childcare workers. Childcare professionals. Interviewees attributed hiring challenges to low compensation, limited benefits in the context of rising costs of living, long hours, and unclear career pathways, and concern about narratives that downplay the expertise needed for childcare work and the way that that can reinforce some of those inequities associated with compensation and benefits, et cetera. Let's go back to, and I apologize for the out of order. So now I'm going to ask you to go back 2 slides to slide 3, and then we'll go ahead to slide 6. Okay, just looking at the third bullet here as we start to transition to what can we possibly do about this. Development of clear pathways to potential workers can help broaden the workforce pool, providing resources for upward mobility, particularly for critical occupations with relatively low wages. So I think there's a recognition, certainly on the commission's part and on the talent assessment author's part, that investment in support for this portion of the workforce, right, associated with lower wage but high skill and high demand professions is really critical if we're going to make a dent in this childcare supply issue. And I've talked with the council in the past that we see this, given the high need for well-educated, well-trained early childhood professionals, and given particularly in the childcare setting specifically, the relatively lower wages associated with the profession, the need for public investment and these career pathways, so both a financial and a sort of policy play here is just critical. It's not, in our view, simply going to magically happen on its own. The study I was just looking at this morning out of the OSU and PSU folks that looks at the early childhood workforce, so I think reinforces the fact that we have a fairly stable decade-long history now of folks leaving and entering the profession, but it is not growing at the rate or at the rate that we'll need in order to reach these the kinds of goals that we have for the development of our workforce overall, right? So let's move ahead now to slide 6. Thank you. We're going to be back and track here. So the HEC collects data from all of our public colleges and universities related to certificate and degree completion. This looks at just a snapshot of the most recent year. This is our roughly 9 community colleges by acronym in that first column, with certificate or associate's degree programs in early learning and care. See the number of completions relatively low given the size of the early childhood workforce, but nevertheless important contributions that our public institutions are making to the education of folks in those professions. Next slide looks at our 4-year public institutions and their bachelor's, post-baccalaureate, and master's degree programs in early learning and care. So you get a sense of the way in which our existing public system is contributing to the education of our early childhood workforce. All right, I'm going to pivot slightly to our child care grant program. So I mentioned that one of the ways we have a small set of tools at the HEC for investing in early childhood education and support for students through and their childcare needs, right? So I say relatively narrow set of tools. We have just a few and very limited funding and support for those activities, but we'll turn to the next slide and look at the Student Child Care Grant, which again, we've worked with the Early Learning Council on before. This is a grant we administer for students who are parents or caregivers of children, young children. And this program, funded by the state through our legislatively adopted budget biannually, provides meaningful grants to students pursuing all kinds of certificates and degrees who are undergraduates, who have young children, whose children are enrolled in programs that meet DELC requirements, who are nearly full-time or at least nearly full-time students. You can see other eligibility requirements here. Very interested, continue to be interested in working with the council both on, either on how to grow this program, and we've talked about that before because you'll see on the next slide, we'll get there in a second, the way in which this program is constrained, or to better align, integrate, or even consolidate this program with other forms of state and federal support for childcare, right? So ERTC, a much larger program. This is very student specific, and it is very small, right? So move on to the next slide. Applicants in the most recent year, 463 applicants. We made just 75 awards. We both, because of the statutory design of the program and then how we've kind of interpreted and implemented that, we make relatively large awards. They do not come close to meeting the full costs of childcare in spite of their size at average awards of almost $8,000 a year, which is large for us in support of students. It is not meeting the full costs, obviously, of year-round or nearly year-round care at a near full-time basis, but it's making a dent, and it's serving just 75 students annually. Total grant dollars, as you see, almost 600,000. We take applications on an annual basis, so we're in the process of processing those for the upcoming academic year starting this fall. Next slide. I mentioned, again, pivoting, I mentioned to another way in which the HAC is involved in supporting the workforce and workforce development, and this gets a little more specifically into the support for early childhood workforce development activities, is through funding and support for local workforce development boards. So here you see 4 of the state's workforce development boards and activities that they are undertaking, in some cases with funding that we administer, support that they're receiving from the HAC for the development and support of professionals in early childhood education. So Clackamas Workforce Partnership, developing a registered apprenticeship program. Some of you, I'm sure, are involved in some of these efforts. I know much more than we do about them, so I don't want to belabor the point, but just acknowledge the work of the Eastern Oregon Workforce Board, the Southern Oregon Workforce Investment Board's Child Care Accelerator program, Work Systems in Portland Metro, attempting to, again, really build out and support and better prepare our early childhood workforce. Next slide. This state apprenticeship expansion formula grant, worth knowing about. There have been multiple rounds of this federal grant. We have applied for and received as the kind of state agency, lead state agency for this grant program that we work with, BOLI, the Bureau of Labor and Industries of the state to administer. This is, again, a federal grant program over multiple rounds that has supported the development of new apprenticeship programs. So apprenticeship, we associate historically with probably many of us with the building trades. But over the years, it has grown, including with the support of the federal government through this grant funding opportunity. Apprenticeship has grown to other careers, other occupations, including in Oregon now, early childhood related uh, uh, careers and occupations. So, see a couple of the investments that we have made through with support from the SAFE grant, State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula grant, through in the Provider Services Fund and to Oregon Coast Community College for the development of and support for apprentices headed towards early childhood careers. Really big fans of this model, right? In contrast to traditional education, where students are often incurring debt and foregoing earnings in order to prepare for career. This apprenticeship is you are paid as you learn, and you are engaged in work as you are also in classrooms, in cohorts, and preparing for a career. So would love to further expand our apprenticeship model for early childhood education. Again, the HEC, just from a kind of bureaucratic state government standpoint, the HEC does not oversee apprenticeship. Oregon's very high quality, rigorous model of registered apprenticeship is run through the Bureau of Labor and Industries, but we are the lead agency, have been, and likely will continue to be the lead agency on apprenticeship expansion efforts, very often in partnership with community colleges, sometimes employers, and others. See, Peter has a question.
Peter.
Yeah, Ben, thanks. I've never seen the phrase mental health technician before. Do you know what level of training that leads someone to? Are they able to actually work with children and families, or are they underneath a supervisor? I'm not sure what that position is.
I don't know, and I welcome anybody else on the call, whether a council member or Jennifer or anyone else who may have more familiarity with that occupation. Anyone?
Yes. Sorry, this is Jennifer. I wanted to say that this is an associate's level degree, but yes, they do help with meeting families where they're at, but also identifying behaviors. I believe another term for this is the behavioral health interventionist for early childhood. It's similar to that in early identification of mental health disabilities and trying to help overcome that in the early childhood sphere.
Thank you. And thanks for the note, Subin, in the chat.
Marie.
I had a question a few slides back, but this slide also brings it to the forefront for me. And Ben, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to, you talked earlier about the development of career pathways. And we know how important it is for students to be able to get from community college to the four-year universities that provide those more advanced degrees. And so one of the things I've heard in other sectors as well is the importance of articulation and the needed articulation between our local community colleges and 4 years, making that transition more seamless and honestly affordable for students who want to continue on. So I wondered if you could speak a little bit more to how the HEC is addressing this.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's a great question and arises in a context of a lot of different career pathways, right? Because that transition for community college, from community college to public university, is so important and so common and desirable. The majority of students who start in a community college intend, at least at the outset, to make that transition. And many of them face a lot of barriers and certainly ones they are not responsible for in making that transition to the four-year institution. The HEC has a lot of history in this area, and we're pretty energetic, and I think we are making some real progress with our college and university partners. So without getting, I guess I could go on all morning about this topic, but I'll just mention a couple of things. One, I encourage you for more information to check out our online resources. We have a whole sort of transfer um, section of our website that's dedicated to it sort of houses all of our primarily policy work related to transfer. So it's less about tools for students, although those are very much under development or in place. We are really focused on transfer policy and making sure that this transition for students is as seamless and they lose as few credits as possible, that the work they do at a community college is acknowledged and recognized and applies to their bachelor's degree. One of the initiatives, one of the approaches two approaches I'll mention that we're taking to that. One, and all this comes through legislation that has assigned responsibility and authority to the HEC for this. One is through common course numbering. So today, we now have I think over 100 lower division courses that share common numbering across community colleges and public universities, common course descriptions, in addition to being commonly numbered and commonly described and with common learning outcomes. They are transferable. So it creates this, and they're designated at the community college with the letter Z. So a community college student knows if they're taking a Z course, it will be transferred and applied to a bachelor's degree. Turns out it's a lot more complicated than that. I wish sort of common course numbering was enough, but we are also working very hard on establishing a set of sort of common, I guess, a common lower division core, general education core that will be transferable and applied to baccalaureate degrees at all 7 public universities. So this really gets at the heart of the issue, which is that the community college student, with all best intentions, takes credits, may even earn an Associates of Arts in Oregon transfer, another types of associate's degree, gets to the public university of their choice in Oregon and finds that some of what they did, maybe a lot of what they did as a community college student, doesn't apply to their bachelor's degree. Through the adoption of, and this is work that we have begun working with faculty actually over the summer to help put this together, through the creation of a lower division general education certificate, essentially, we will soon guarantee that community college transfer student, that they have satisfied those lower division credits. They will still have other bachelor's degree requirements, of course, ones related to their major, as well as potentially some upper division general education requirements. There are likely to be still some other bespoke requirements based on the university that they're attending, but that lower division should be satisfiable at the community college. There are some additional wrinkles as you get into specific majors, and have done a lot through major transfer maps to, again, try to iron that out for community college students. So considerable progress, more to go. We've done work on the education pathway specifically for education majors. So if you are at our website and are interested in more and with a specific focus on education, there are some resources there. I hope that helps.
Helps. I wonder, you said soon. I wonder if you have a goal or a time frame in mind. And then knowing the crisis of childcare, I wondered if you have prioritized EC programs to be able to get those articulations agreements sooner rather than later on your time frame.
Yeah, I'll have to follow up on the articulation of the ECE programs in the major transfer map. That's what we call these kind of major specific projects. We've actually deferred in order to build out and focus on this common transferable lower division core, general ed core. We've delayed some work on our major transfer maps, and we're putting a lot of emphasis over the next year. So you asked about timing. we expect to bring back to the commission, to the HAC, policy for that lower division core, transferable core. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'll follow up with staff if I get this wrong, but I believe next spring, so in the spring of 2027, is when we expect to have that policy prepared and ready for adoption. I expect that some of you have worked in and around higher education institutions, and have a sense of the complexity of and challenges associated with the refinement or adjustment of degree requirements, pathways, courses, etc. We're working with literally hundreds of faculty. We have worked with hundreds of faculty. I think are currently working probably with dozens of faculty across the state in the development of these approaches to transfer. These are from an academic standpoint, these are effectively faculty-run institutions, right? So it's a highly decentralized model that requires us to work very closely with faculty leaders across higher education to make these kinds of changes.
Subin.
I don't know if there's more in the presentation, so I can wait if you want to finish, I'll
go ahead and ask. There's really just one more slide related to the apprenticeship. Actually, no, I think we're. Oh yeah, there's one more slide on this SAFE grant, but feel free, we can come back to it.
Okay. This is. I don't know if I have a direct question. This is more of an overall reflection to what I'm seeing in this report. First of all, like there's again a real appreciation that childcare and early childhood is being called out in this, broader Oregon Talent Assessment report, that it's on the map, that there's being some focus and attention put to it. It feels good, right? It feels right. I also appreciate just from this presentation and from the report that it's not just calling out higher education. You named the workforce development boards and kind of some regional solutions that have been, and the Early Learning Council has visited and seen and heard from several of those folks. And one of the things that I just feel like, this makes me sound older than I am, but I've been in these workforce conversations for 20 years now. And what I'm seeing in this report is it's really the focus on we need to build supply, right? We need to build supply, get people into the workforce. Totally see that in the report. And another big conversation that's been having in the workforce around early childhood is, how do we recognize these folks as professionals? So part of that is the compensation thing, which feels intractable and really difficult to solve, but it's also the career pathways in terms of higher education degrees and qualifications, and recognizing that these are a discrete set of skills that are different from other professions, and it requires very specific training and things like that. So I just don't want that to get lost in it, because I don't think we have to make an either or decision of, are we only trying to build supply, or are we also trying to professionalize our field? I think it's both things are really important. But when we talk about professionalizing the field, I feel like as accountant, this is maybe a comment directed towards the council, I'm really hungry for conversations around Oro and around Spark and around the investments we have made to try and address these types of issues around professionalizing our workforce. And, I remember conversations around, let's look at the nursing field and how did they do it? And let's look at K-12 and teaching licensures and how they do it. And let's learn from these analogous kinds of ways of looking at it. And so I'm hopeful for conversations to come about the workforce in addition to building supply.
I appreciate that. I wish I'll acknowledge my own lack of expertise in that sort of larger and part, I think, historical question about how other, especially caring occupations, right? I mean, you mentioned K-12, nursing, how this sort of process and the mechanisms through which they became both professionalized, better recognized and honored, and frankly, better paid. Um, I think we intersect this, and without that sort of a historical understanding of the process, we look at it almost in a point of time sense and say, well, gosh, and you've heard this from me before, and I feel I sort of slightly embarrassed to come to the council and report it, but we remain wary about at a point in time about a big higher education related push when the costs of being a student are as high as they are, particularly in Oregon, and the return to the individual through the career of choice, early childhood, is as low on average as it is, right? That with my team, and as we look across the landscape of sectors and occupations and training pathways, we're like, boy, this is a tough one. It's tough to make this pencil, right? If we're taught, especially once we start talking about associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, right? Given what we know about the level of debt that individuals have to incur. And I say embarrassed because I really we want to come to you and work with you in a posture of support and enthusiasm for professionalization, for the role of higher education and training in early childhood. These are incredibly important jobs. Over the years and working with the council, I've probably shared my father spent his career in early childhood, right? He was a early childhood educator. I grew up sort of in classrooms and that he oversaw with little kids, 3, 4, 5, 6 year olds. And so I have an extraordinary respect for and belief in the importance of the work, and it is really extraordinary how little we seem to regard that as a society, and that's reflected in how we pay. And then it puts us professionally in this position where, like, gosh, we're not sure about the bachelor's degree path, for example, given the costs to the individual. All that.
Robin.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate so much of everything that you shared. I really appreciated you started out by sharing the acknowledgement that childcare workforce issues aren't just needed, but they help. Not just that, but they help all of the workforce. So that was the first note that I took of like, yes, absolutely. And then you continue to share how important it is. And I also really appreciate your personal value with your father being involved in it. I think my questions and comments are aligned with what you were sharing regarding expertise that you may have or on your team may or may not have, and coming to the council, which we appreciate you presenting to the council. And many of us may have an opinion about something, have some ideas, something to share, but I'm more curious about the role of HEC in convening the early childhood higher ed partners to a table. It makes me think of the Grand Articulation Summit, which I'm sure you're probably involved with. But when I think of some of the things that Subin brought up with Oro at Portland State University, at Western Oregon University has programming that supports the workforce, and on and on and on. You have at your fingertips some of the experts in higher ed, and you have at your fingertips some of the partners, Delk and others in the state who grapple with this all the time. Is there a place where the answers that we are seeking to, remediate, fix the problems that we're talking about, do you have like a table where you and your staff are able to gain the expertise that you may not already have, because I would be interested as a council member in hearing a future presentation where that's what's happened since we met last. Is here's what we're doing on the back end, in the back. We're meeting with these partners to understand this better, because you yourself have shared, and we all agree with you, that we have a really big problem to solve in early childhood with the workforce, and we need higher ed to be helping us come up with the solutions for not just recruiting and helping us get the workforce built, but also supporting them in those placements, because all of those partners that I named and others are working on both sides of that coin. And so I don't know, it's kind of a long ramble, but I am just curious, who are your trusted advisors and how can we help with that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. We would be certainly interested in working with you or the council and others in considering or thinking about what that type of role for the hack, that convening role and that learning role, what that could look like. I just have to, in the interest of full sort of transparency, I sort of have to caution just how little kind of dedicated capacity we have for that type of effort, right? So I and our agency works across literally hundreds of career pathways involving higher education, right? And different degree types, right? So I can have a similar conversation to this one with forestry, with engineering, with K-12, with go on and on, right? Take your pick, right? We are, and there are obviously other areas of acute workforce need where we do attempt to go a little beyond just scratching the surface. We are also, from a capacity standpoint, our primary focus has to be on the administration of programs, right? So what we've described even in this slide and others is the administration of state and federal dollars in support of the objectives that have been articulated through grants or through legislation. So that gives us sort of a very modest amount of capacity to develop expertise or do convening. Would love to have a center or an institute that had dedicated support for that. And I saw Jennifer came off mute or maybe had her hand, so welcome her to add to that. Anything that
Yeah, so I can just add that I have been working really closely with Sydney Train at Delk and looking at career pathways and figuring out, like, she had some great content about what questions to ask someone as they're kind of going down this career pathway and what that looks like. I can say that I've also met with the Children's Institute about the same thing. Like, how do you even become a policy analyst in early childhood education? And starting out as, a center owner, like, how do you actually make those steps? So these are conversations that, I'm having, but as Ben said, I have, 5 other industries that I'm focusing on. So it doesn't allow quite the depth, I think, that you would be like looking for. But know that I have been working very closely with Delk, and I know they have a new workforce person who I just met, I would say, a few weeks ago. So I'm working through how we can better partner together as staff, looking at the same things, and how how we can strategize that together. So I am kind of capitalizing on that partnership that you guys were talking about, and also trying to figure out how you do this. You can't move a mountain in a day, but we're having some of these conversations about what this might look like in the future and how to better partner together on these like granular tasks of making a career lattice or career pathway, and what that looks like. So these conversations are kind of happening, but they were in super early stages.
Katie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for doing this. So as you were making your presentation, a lot of the conversation that's been taking place is around, the bugaboo about this whole thing is that it just doesn't pay well and it isn't recognized. And I think we've spent a fair amount of time talking about this. And I don't know who fixes that. But just real-time feedback. I reached out to our workforce folks in Central Oregon because I was surprised that Central Oregon wasn't up there with the programs that we did have at OSU Cascades. And I know we were working on this pipeline ourselves for childcare providers. And the feedback I got is the issue is the wages from these employers that are hiring the apprentices is really, really low. That Central Oregon Community College is really well positioned and have done many, many apprenticeship programs. But the challenge is who pays for those folks on the job when the provider's margins are so tight. So, it's here, some assistance for your degree, and go out and get these apprenticeships and making them worthwhile for the person doing them and affordable for the person receiving them seems to be what's hanging it up here. And all it is money, really. But I thought I'd share that because, boy, that's what it looks like on the ground and in real time. And I don't know how we go about solving this. And maybe the only way is through a collaboration through DELC and higher ed, just to figure out what does this pathway look like, but also maybe we do fewer apprenticeships because we can't afford it and somehow subsidize it on the employer end. So we're balancing things out. And I'm not familiar with the intricacies of this program, but if you don't have it fully funded throughout the spectrum, it's spotty at best. And maybe you put that responsibility on the region to say, hey, go get some money somehow to go help employers, the providers pay for these apprentices when they come. I don't know what that looks like, but going to one part of the problem when the wages are so low and the margins are so tight isn't enough. It has to be fully supported 360 degrees. It sounds like to actually make it work and translate into an actual job one day and something that works for the provider and the student. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
That's really great real-time feedback and consistent with what I've heard even more broadly in the context of attempting to expand apprenticeship. Look, everybody loves apprenticeship, and I talked about the learn and earn model. And apprenticeship is really hard to grow because it is really costly, because someone is paying for the learner to learn and work, right? And so these numbers, and there is one more slide, and you just quickly advance to the last one because it acknowledges the ongoing. So this is a safe slide 11 focuses on new apprenticeship growth or some new apprenticeship program. These are existing programs that we've used SAFE dollars to invest in: Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, Southwest Oregon Workforce Investment Board. And again, you see relatively small numbers here, in part just a reflection of the costs associated with a high quality and very attractive to the learner worker model. And that if only only money were not an object.
Yep, I totally understand.
Do you have additional slides, Ben?
I do not. This ends the what we had prepared. I really appreciate the conversation and feedback. I would love to, work with the council and with Jennifer to figure out how to further develop our expertise and capacity for leadership, including through convening with our higher education and training partners. Um, I think continuing to build our staff to staff relationship with Delk, given their considerable understanding of and engagement with the sector on a day-to-day basis. I think that's important. We'll continue to attempt to elevate the issue to the public and policymakers through opportunities like the talent assessment. I mean, we wanted to highlight that because it is one of our higher profile reports and ways that we attempt to engage, again, the public and policymakers in an understanding of what's going on in the workforce. For, again, it's not policy, it's not having a direct, it's not program, but it is awareness, right? We are attempting to do our part, at least, in building awareness among folks about the criticality of childcare to workforce development generally, and the criticality of the childcare workforce in helping raise our kiddos. And so we're doing what we can, and just appreciate the partnership, and would love to figure out ways to build on it going forward.
Gabby.
Thanks, Liz. Director Cannon, I actually just had a question because when reviewing the talent assessment report, right, and I know it was included in your slides, there was a quote that ECE is foundational, right, and it's the work that makes all other work possible. And I know it was mentioned in 2024 as well. Does HEC have a sense of, I guess, the need for childcare supports in other industries that could maybe just help highlight the actual need? I understand, and I really appreciate the inclusion of that quote in the report, but it's almost like, is something missing that really articulates how much other occupations really rely on childcare to fully, be able to show up to work? And just wondering if HEC has any background on that. It's okay if you don't, or if you
Yeah.
can't answer that question right now.
Yeah, I don't, welcome. I mean, if Jennifer thinks of anything, I think what you're asking for, Gabby, that I don't think we have is greater sort of specificity or even kind of quantification of the relationship or the need that our workforce has more generally for childcare in order to grow and thrive beyond the sort of value statement or the framing of this as essential for the work of childcare, as essential for the workforce. Sort of can we put greater kind of specificity or quantification on it? And I don't know that I'm not familiar with that data. And again, Jennifer, if you think of anything, feel free to come off mute. But it's what we know is that, and what the talent assessment reflects, is that when we talk to employers, right, about their hiring needs or their retention challenges, right, and when we talk to students about their barriers to completing their accessing or completing their educational journeys in preparation for whatever careers they're pursuing, we know that childcare comes up at or near the top of the list of needs and barriers over and over and over again. So I think that that's what the talent assessment reflects, is more of that sort of qualitative, survey informed, interview informed, right? It just keeps coming up. But in terms of some sort of more, like quantification, I'm not aware of anything. Jennifer?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you're right. It touches all industries. There are parents in so many types of jobs. So I think that makes it a little bit more of a challenge. However, like I have heard from the local workforce boards, again, anecdotal, that manufacturing specifically is an industry that requires assistance with childcare. People can't just leave their job in manufacturing as easily. They don't have access to their phones as readily. So it can be more difficult to like leave your job for childcare or to get updates about what's going on with your kids. So that industry is one I know specifically, and there have been some public-private partnerships that have been really successful in manufacturing related to childcare, which is really great. I mean, even in Boardman with Boardman Foods, their model is really great with offering childcare and non typical hours. So that can be also really helpful for people, but you have to have those like flexible pieces that don't always exist in every situation. And I think that can be a challenge. But one thing that I was thinking about, Ben, and I don't know, maybe it's something to talk about later, but we could potentially ask our industry consortia in manufacturing, tech, and healthcare kind of what barriers their their members are seeing related to childcare in those three sectors, and then share that back out with you all later once we've kind of collected that and validated that data. So I just wanted to like say we do have some industry engagement that we could potentially ask these questions to, and then bring them back to council to digest.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Happy to work with you on that.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And I don't want to speak for council or for my other Delk colleagues as well, but I will say that I think Delk, please use Delk as a partner if there's anything we can do to kind of help get some quantitative data or support efforts in obtaining quantitative data. I think we have qualitative data. It's outlined in the report, but I do think just having some numbers to tie into the actual need might help with policymakers and legislators to really address the need if we're able to really just get some quantitative information in there. Thanks for sharing. I didn't think you all had that. So just if there's any opportunity to kind of work together to, brainstorm and try and get some numbers in the future, please let us know.
I'll just say one more thing, sort of related. I mean, we've talked about childcare workforce here as a workforce issue, and of course, I think we're also thinking about it in terms of the experience of the development of young children, right? Probably most importantly. But the workforce issues actually sit downstream of what I think is and should be a primary focus of the state, which is on economic development, right? And while we access the economic development question at the HEC partly or largely through workforce, right? We recognize that that's really just in service of meeting our state's sort of prosperity goals through economic development. And I think given the growing attention of our governor and legislative leaders on economic development, I think that's sort of the ultimate tie that we'd like to be able to make, that I'm sure you'd like to be able to make, to childcare as an industry and the childcare workforce as a need to the state's larger goals for prosperity, right? We can't have thriving social service systems, education systems, economy, environment, et cetera. Really hard to have that without a thriving economy. And we see childcare ultimately and the childcare workforce as in large part in service of that, as well as, of course, the developmental needs of our children, which probably is really at the heart of it all.
I appreciate that observation. I was thinking, especially with Jana's presentation before you, and we're talking about needing to build this sort of long-term, widespread support and campaign for what comes next on this sort of longer roadmap. It seems to me that being able to tie that directly with the prosperity agenda is going to be really, really critical to get the buy-in for people who don't have young children or who are not employers that are seeing that. How do we make that a broader story? And I think you've tapped into exactly that thread that we need to be able to pull. So I appreciate that insight. Are there any other last questions for Director Cannon before we move on? I think we've exhausted him for this time around, Ben.
Appreciate it. Always a pleasure to spend time with you and happy to come back.
Thank you so much.
Right.
And
Take
thanks to
care.
Jennifer as well. And then also just really continuing to elevate this. I know this compensation issue continues to be a tripping point for this work, but it seems like we are at least gaining a wider understanding of how this sector impacts all sectors. And so I think that's valuable. So thank you for spending the morning with us. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to do a transition, and I want to make sure, let me just double check that. Hello, Donna. I see you on here. I wanted to make sure you had joined us. We're going to move into awarding the Lynn England Award. As you all remember, this was an award that we brought back last year. And so I'm going to turn it over to Gabby to give a few opening remarks about the award and who Lynn was, and then we'll go ahead and award it. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Council, again, just really excited to really bring this award back. I think it's really important to continue to acknowledge the great people in our state who are doing really great work for children and families. So I'm just going to give just a brief overview on just the award itself and how it came to be. So Lynn England was a passionate visionary dedicated to Oregon's families. She was the vice chair of the Commission for Childcare from 2004 to 2008. Unfortunately, when her untimely death left a void that only her diligent advocacy could have filled, Lynn's service, passion, and leadership improved the lives of Oregon's children and families. And as a former owner of a child care center, she opened to benefit her employees. Lynn personally understood that quality childcare is dynamic as a workforce and an early childhood education issue. So to honor Lynn's commitment to strengthening Oregon's next generation, the Commission for Childcare established the Lynn England Award, and the ELC has continued to award the Lynn England Award to really charge through honoring folks who are contributing to improving childcare and the lives of children and families in Oregon. The Lynn England Award recognizes people and organizations who improve safety, quality, affordability, and access to childcare, both at the state and local levels. Again, we're just really excited to be bringing this back as it memorializes Lynn and spotlights the incredible ongoing work that folks are doing to improving early childhood and care.
And so today I have the honor of presenting Donna Schnitger with the 2026 Lynn England Award. Donna has been an extraordinary champion for young children and families, dedicating more than 30 years to this work. Based in Harney County, Donna has touched the lives of thousands of young children and families through her many roles in early childhood. She served as the director of early childhood programs for Harney Education Service District, the president of the Oregon Head Start Association, a member of the Early Learning Council, and has made significant contributions to strengthening our early learning hubs. We are deeply grateful for her tremendous contributions to bettering the lives of young children and their families in Harney County, in Eastern Oregon, and across our state. So on behalf of the Early Learning Council, it is an honor to recognize Donna today with the 2026 Lynn England Award. So everyone is, I see, clapping. And then Donna is joining us today. Donna, I don't know if you want to say a few words. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to be here. And I want to say I'm incredibly honored and so surprised when Gabby told me that I was the recipient of the award this year. I was in shock for a while because I hide out sometimes over here in Eastern Oregon, but I've always tried to be an advocate for our frontier communities because children out here don't have a lot and they can't get to anything either. So if I don't, or somebody doesn't bring it to them, it doesn't happen. And so anytime there was an opportunity to expand what we did in Eastern Oregon, I would take advantage of it. And then I also worked with the Head Start Association to expand Head Start We started out with small amount of slots, and they have expanded to a gigantic program that really serves families that if Head Start did not exist or Preschool Promise, they would not have access to preschool, which puts them at a disadvantage when they start school. And that was always been my focus. I want kids to have the best of everything, and I want them to have access to the best of everything that we can possibly give them. So thank you so much. I'm honored.
Well, thank you for your work. Now you see why it was an easy choice listening to her speak. And I believe, Gabby, you've got something coming to her in the mail. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm doing arrangements to either send it in the mail, Donna. We do have an award for you here in the office, or get it to you over in Burn. So working with Patty to kind of finalize those details. So really excited to yeah, give you the award in person if I have the chance to.
That'd be great.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'd love to do it in person. I'll come over, not very far away from you.
Great.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again so much and congratulations. Thank you for all your service to Oregon's children and families.
Thank you. It's a privilege.
Wonderful.
Donna.
All right, Council. That's like my favorite part of the year. We're going to move into public comments before we head into some updates on Every Child Belongs. Gabby, do we have any public comment?
No, we did not have anybody registered to give verbal public comment today. I do want to flag, though, for council that we did receive just public comments during when our public comment period was open for Every Child Belongs. We have a public comment summary and our agency response linked for you all in the council action request specific to Every Child Belongs in case folks are interested in reviewing those. So you'll see just the written comments that we received, and then we also attached our responses as well for folks.
Fantastic. And we'll dive more into all of that here shortly. We're going to move into now an update on Every Child Belongs. But before we hear directly from the program staff, I wanted to turn it over to Carrie McCann for some reflections on early childhood mental health and DELC's work in this space. Carrie?
Yeah, good morning. It's great to be with all of you today. I know Alyssa wanted to be with you, but she is on vacation. I'm going to offer a few reflections, and some of you might see them as familiar, but we thought it would be a good grounding to kind of remind ourselves why Every Child Belongs exists and the work that our licensing division is doing. So I'm just going to open up with a few slides and then turn it over to my colleagues. All right. Have I successfully shared slides? Okay, great. So when we think about early childhood mental health, right, this is about young children's ability to experience, express, and regulate their emotions, form secure and close relationships with their caregivers in particular, explore their environment and learn from that exploration. It's synonymous with social and emotional health and well-being, and it often can be expressed in how children share their curiosity, persistence, trust, self-confidence, and motivation, and all characteristics that I think when we see older children, we think that's what learning is and being successful. We know that young children develop in the context of relationships, so that by definition, a baby's mental health is dependent on the mental health and well-being of their primary caregivers. There are cross-cultural differences, so children are raised in their family's culture and community, and they learn how to express and interpret emotions, and that can kind of look different across cultures about how anger, shame, exuberance of happiness, or joy is expressed. We also know that young children's language is often behavior, right? Because this is the time period where they're learning language. And so we know that pediatrician Brazelton taught us the concept that there are periods of time when children have very challenging behavior, especially as experienced by adults, that occur before there's a burst of child development and they're integrating either new knowledge and skills. And he called these periods as touch points. And so we know that there are times when these touch points can disrupt relationships, but this also gives the opportunities for adults to strengthen them and really kind of foster their development. But we also know at the same time that mental health can be undermined by early adversity and that there are risks that our young children experience that can impact them over their lifetime. And we know that there's also this continuum of stress, that we're not seeking an environment where there's like no stress. Mild, temporary stressors can be positive, like going to childcare for the first time. And that supportive adults help children kind of build their resilience and skills for positive mental health when these situations occur. But when stressors get bigger, our bodies, all of us, kind of kick into survival mode and prepare us for either fight, flight, or freeze. And when that happens, children use adults to regulate their response to stress. So again, the caregiving in the adults and young children's lives are what's ameliorating the impacts of this stress. We help them get back to their baseline, get back into a normal range. Adults can help make these stressors tolerable for children. The term toxic stress really refers to the strong, frequent, or prolonged periods of when children are experiencing and often do not have the protective relationships that help them ameliorate and be resilient in the face of them. Things like prolonged neglect, ongoing abuse, witnessing domestic violence are all examples of the kinds of things that we mean by toxic stress. We know that this can impact a baby's brain architecture, and we've actually seen research that shows that there's fewer neural connections in the prefrontal cortex, while stronger ones in the part of the brain for fear and anxiety. These are the kinds of things that increase risk for later problems. So we know that young children and even infants can show early warning signs of these kinds of concerns and risks. They can present as developmental delays, inconsolable crying, failure to seek comfort with caregivers, a lack of curiosity. We can see it in older children where maybe they're throwing things or hitting others. And so we want to just share that these can be very challenging experiences for adults of how best to respond, but also behaviors can mean a lot of different things. So how do we understand their language? But we also wanted to flag that there is good news, that we also know that if they're identified early, that there are things that we can do, that as adults in children's lives, that there's ways that we can respond. And so as we think about kind of the promotion prevention side of the work, this can happen anywhere. This can happen at the home with parents. But I think one of the things we identified when I first joined you around this topic about a year and a half ago is that children with parents who work spend about 11,500 hours in some kind of early care and education setting before kindergarten, and that it will take them between kindergarten and ninth grade to accumulate that much time in a learning environment again. So really thinking about the opportunity that DELC and our partners and practitioners in the field have of what does it mean to offer a nurturing environment where relationships are strong, the environment's appropriately stimulating so that these hours are really supporting their development and positive mental health. And that when there are things that are not, that are more than what that environment can handle, we also want to share the good news that there are specific tools and treatments that do exist across our nation for this population, and that by definition, that those treatment offers are in conjunction and paired with their caregiver and parents. But that we know that kind of one of our barriers is that providers need specialized training and deep understanding in human development about this age group and how to do that unique work of parents and children together. So I think I just wanted to offer this as a grounding so that as we kind of think about the role of Every Child Belongs, what is the opportunity that we have? What is the part of Every Child Belongs to be part of this prevention world? And then there's obviously other parts of the system that need to come along our side to offer what our children, family, and providers need. So that was just to set some context for now the kind of program and policy work that we've been doing over the last several months. All right. Gabby, will we transition to Lindsay and Katrina and then take questions? Okay.
Yes. So we'll get the ECB slides pulled up.
Thanks. Now we'll hear directly from staff about where we are on Every Child Belongs and the rollout. And we've been hearing periodic updates, and we're now getting very close to having the prohibition come online. So it'll be interesting to hear what has happened since the last time we saw you all. Go ahead and take it over.
Thank you. Hi, Council. My name is Lindsay Baltus. I'm the Every Child Belongs manager at DELC, and I'm here with Katrina Miller. You can introduce yourself and say hi, Katrina, if you want.
Yeah, good morning, Council. I'm Katrina Miller, she, her pronouns, infant and early childhood mental health specialist with DELC.
And I also just wanted to mention that Nancy Hsu is also here. She has recently been appointed, along with Subin, co-chair of the Every Child Belongs Advisory Committee. So thanks, Nancy, for joining, and she can answer questions about the advisory committee's work if council members have them.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions. Hi, my name is Nancy Hsu. I am an assistant professor at the clinical psychology program at Pacific University. And yeah, just like Lindsay said, I just got elected for the co-chair and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide. All right, so just purpose of this part of our update for you today, we're going to share with you just a refresher and an update on the current state of Every Child Belongs and what our focus is now. And then we have some information we wanted to share with you about what we know about the multiple drivers of suspension in an expulsion in early learning and care, and talk about where Every Child Belongs is currently addressing these drivers, and then what is not within the scope of Every Child Belongs. And thinking that, this might prompt some discussion and reflection from all of you on what would future impact look like across the system to prevent suspension and expulsion. So we can go to the next slide. So just grounding a little bit more in the background of the early childhood suspension and expulsion prevention program. So we know that suspension and expulsion in early childhood harm children and families, and that children of color and children experiencing disabilities experience suspension and expulsion at a higher rate than their same age peers. And so House Bill 2166 established Every Child Belongs. That's the prevention program. And just wanting to reiterate that Every Child Belongs is aligned with Senate Bill 236, which is the prohibition on suspension and expulsion in all licensed and DELC-funded early learning and care settings, but it's distinct from Every Child Belongs. So DELC does not have authority to enforce the prohibition and really has been focused on prevention and making sure providers have access to those prevention services and know that they're available. And those services are really designed to help increase provider knowledge and skills so that they can keep kids in care. Next slide, please. We've shown you this before, but I just wanted to show again, this is our strategic framework that kind of organizes the work we're doing as part of the Every Child Belongs initiative. So our ultimate goal, of course, is to reduce suspension and expulsion rates and disparities in early learning and care programs in Oregon. And the work that we're doing to move towards that goal is organized around these 4 objectives that you see here in blue. So as we'll talk a little bit more about, the services that are part of Every Child Belongs are really designed to help increase the knowledge and skills of the early learning and care workforce. And that includes expanded access to training on anti-bias, anti-racism, inclusion, and trauma-informed practices. It includes technical assistance response when providers submit a request through Every Child Belongs. It also includes, in some cases, infant and early childhood mental health consultation. That's the new service that's available through Every Child Belongs. And our system, ECB Connect, which is the easy access point for providers to request support, is how we're providing access to supports for programs with children at risk of suspension and expulsion. So through that system, the idea is to create that easy access point. And then also that allows us to learn as we're implementing this program and analyze, collect some data about what's happening for providers. And how can we improve these supports and kind of evaluate the work over time? So we have, like I said, we're measuring what supports providers are getting through ECB Connect. We also, over the course of the next year, will be doing a preliminary program evaluation to gather a little bit more qualitative data from providers, from regional partners, and from families about what's happening with Every Child Belongs implementation. And then we are also really focused on aligning policies and coordinating with systems both within DELC and with our other state partners, because we know because the drivers of suspension and expulsion are, systemic and cross systems, that we need to be collaborating with Oregon Health Authority and ODE. And then, of course, we're also doing the policy work within DELC, and that's the rules that you all will be voting on today. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about our cross-agency work in a little bit. But I'm going to hand it to Katrina to talk about where we are with implementation.
Thank you, Lindsay. Let's go to the next slide. So we are delighted to now have Every Child Belongs services available statewide, and to have the online form, that easy access form for requesting services is available wherever you go. So since the middle of March, it has been available statewide. Altogether, we've received over 311 support requests. 311 was the number last week, and I know that we've received additional requests since then. We also have 22 about 22 FTE in IECMH consultants who have been hired. In terms of actual human beings, it's 23 or 24 actual people filling the 22 FTE. So that is tremendously exciting. And then of all of those 311 plus support requests, 67% have been assigned to infant early childhood mental health consultation and 33% to technical assistance. I should say it's of the ones who get assigned to a service path, and I'll say more about that on the next slide. This is the breakdown between technical assistance and mental health consultation. Let's go to the next slide. So this one, so everyone who receives, who submits a form will get a response. And usually that response is within 1 to 2 business days. And I know that many of the regional service providers actually try to make the response the same day that the request is received. So very quick response, that vulnerability once a provider has gotten to that point of saying, I need help, then they have a quick response. So some requesters are directed towards technical assistance, some towards infant early childhood mental health consultation, and then some are referred to other resources or supports. It's not ECB is not intended to be sort of the referral network, but if somebody contacts ECB, we're going to help them get connected to what they need. And of course, the services are focused on supporting providers to support children, rather than a direct service that supports the child. When you look at this graph, what you can see is overall 21% of requests have been assigned to technical assistance, 42% to infant early childhood mental health consultation. Then there's 3% that have been deferred. And often that means that we've been trying to get a hold of the provider. We're calling them and they're not answering. And so after a few times of trying, we'll move that into a deferred category. So we aren't closing it. We're leaving it there and saying we may come back to this. 19% are closed at screening. That may be because the regional support specialist never does get in contact with, let me say that a different way. They make the attempts to get in contact, but don't succeed in getting back in contact with the person who's made the request. Or it could be that the requested, the need that the person has is fulfilled a different way. And then 15% are kind of in that not yet assigned. There is always a lag time between when the request is received and when it gets assigned. Next slide, please. I think you all have seen this before, and but I'll walk through it again. This is our process map on what happens when a provider submits a request. So first, that form is filled out and it's submitted. It is received both by DELC and by the regional providers at the same time. So then the provider receives that phone call back from somebody at the regional level to gather more information, have a relationship-based conversation that says, tell me what's going on. And then at step 3, there is a coordination process that happens between the technical assistance and the mental health consultation team to identify who is the best match for this particular situation. Then whoever is identified contacts the provider, works with them at number 5 to provide support. And this support may last anywhere from a couple of months to potentially a year, depending on the nature of the situation. And then the goal is that the collaborative efforts, keep the child in the program. We do know that sometimes children, it won't be possible to maintain all children in their current placement. And so we've designated a transition plan, that there may be times when a transition plan is developed, and it would be developed in collaboration with a support specialist, the provider, and the child's family. Next slide, and I think I'm tossing it back to Lindsay.
Yep, thanks, Katrina. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we know about the drivers of expulsion and early care and education, and where Every Child Belongs really is designed to address those drivers, where it partially addresses those drivers, and where those drivers are not within the scope of Every Child Belongs or DELC to address currently. We know that suspension and expulsion are the result of complex system level factors, and a literature review by the BUILD initiative shows that these can be divided into 6 system level drivers that increases the likelihood that exclusionary practices are used. So where Every Child Belongs really is focused and does currently address drivers of suspension and expulsion. We know that sometimes teachers need more knowledge and skills to promote social emotional development and to help address challenging behavior. And Every Child Belongs services really are designed to address this driver. Teachers might need help using practices that help reduce stress for children, that are helping to teach children social emotional skills, that help children develop supportive relationships, and the provider develop supportive relationships with the child. And we are hearing already from mental health consultants and providers that when they request support through Every Child Belongs and a specialist goes out to the program, teachers feel supported in this area. And I wanted to tell a story that I heard just yesterday. So Katrina and I had a chance to be in person with several mental health consultants from different areas of the state. It was a great session facilitated by a RIMHA to talk about how mental health consultants and technical assistance practitioners can coordinate at the local level and work together. And one mental health consultant shared that she was working with a program that was struggling to understand how to meet the needs of this particular child. When she went in to the program to learn more, she learned that they had this basket of supplies that they knew that they could use to work with this particular kiddo, and they really just needed support thinking through how to use them, like what to do on a day-to-day basis. So that consultant spent some time with them coming up with strategies. They started using those strategies right away, and pretty quickly the consultant said they saw what they called a complete 180 in the child's behavior. And the teachers said that they felt less stressed and overwhelmed. They were just enjoying time with the child a lot more. And because this child's behavior has settled, they have more capacity to focus on the whole group of kids in their care. So we're starting more and more to hear stories like that, and we have more to share with you before the end of this presentation. So this is one of the areas where we are seeing that ECB services really can make a difference. The other one that we know contributes to expulsion is disparities in how discipline is used, disparities related to race and ethnicity and/or a child's special needs. And Every Child Belongs does address this driver. So services available through ECB are intended to make an impact in this area. Mental health consultants are trained to understand bias and how to use anti-bias and anti-racist practices. The approach, infant early childhood mental health consultation, as an approach, is explicitly grounded in anti-racism. And that was another thing. It was great to hear consultants talk a little bit more about yesterday, how they're trained to understand, how who we are and our relationship to power impacts how we show up with providers and with children, really understanding how to elevate the child and family voice and train and support providers to work with families and engage meaningfully with families as they're working with kids. I also wanted to mention that we're doing some work to increase access to foundational trainings in this area for all providers over the next year. So rolling out additional training on topics including anti-bias and anti-racism in early education. And that also includes foundational training topics we're focused on also include trauma-informed care and managing escalating behaviors. So it's both kind of the responsive services and those, trainings that are available to all providers before they even reach out to Every Child Belongs at all. There are a couple of drivers of expulsion that Every Child Belongs partially addresses. So one of those is trauma and early childhood mental health problems. So we know that about 10% of young children have an emotional, relational, or behavioral disturbance and/or have experienced trauma. And we know that early trauma and challenges with mental health, as Carrie was mentioning, are linked to challenging behavior. And we say that Every Child Belongs partially addresses this driver because it's not a direct mental health support for families or children. Infant and early childhood mental health consultation helps providers and those adults caring for the children to support young children's mental health needs. I will mention that we're partnering with the Oregon Health Authority to understand what are promising practices for increasing those direct behavioral health supports for young children and families, particularly in rural areas, and kind of just learning about bright spots and how we could build on those in the future. So that's one kind of promising area for cross-system collaboration. And also that we know that high quality early learning settings in themselves, when they offer nurturing and responsive relationships, they can create a foundation for children's healing and development. So that's the work of DELC more broadly that Every Child Belongs is part of. We also know that one driver of expulsion is when early childhood educators have limited internal and external resources to support them. And that might look like stress, teacher stress, feelings of teacher hopelessness. It might look like lack of time. And it might look like not enough or consistent availability of mental health consultation or other supports. So, Every Child Belongs is still at the beginning of implementing our program and our services, and we're hoping to continue to build and grow over time. But we are, like I mentioned, already seeing how it's easier for providers to access supports that were not already available, or that either were already available or that weren't previously in the case of mental health consultation. Infant early childhood mental health consultation has been shown to help decrease teacher feelings of stress and hopelessness, and that consultative stance that the professionals in this area use in their work. One element of that is really holding hope that for the provider as they're caring for the child. that things will get better. There are other DELC efforts that help address this area, including work to expand the pool of substitutes, some of the work related to Spark to support providers' well-being, some of the work that CCRNRs are doing through professional development cohorts. And then this is also one that we could explore and talk about how cross-system partnerships could help address. So the two that Every Child Belongs does not currently address, one is demands on staff when teacher-child ratios are high. And there is a little caveat and some important context here. So this was a national review, the literature review. And so high ratios, they identified high ratios as problematic most in other states compared to other states. Oregon's teacher-child ratios are relatively low. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't still stress on providers when they feel like there are not enough adults in the room. Every Child Belongs services don't change ratios or create more time for teachers. Like I mentioned, DELC is working on expanding the pool of substitutes as a way to help teachers get a little bit more time and partially to engage in Every Child Belongs services. And we're looking at how we can make sure that providers, when they connect with Every Child Belongs, are also available, that they might be able to request a sub. But changing ratios across the early learning system would really require a massive investment and a major increase in the workforce. So that part is out of scope for Every Child Belongs at this time. And then the other driver is systemic issues and family stress. So examples there are homelessness or food insecurity. Every Child Belongs doesn't directly address this driver, although mental health consultants may support providers to refer families to services that help support in this area. Okay, I think we're ready to go on to the next slide, which talks just a little bit about our cross-agency work. We are working with both the Oregon Department of Education, who's responsible for EIECSE services, and the Oregon Health Authority, who's responsible for behavioral health services for children and families, to increase coordination and collaboration because we know we're all responsible for different parts of the system that help support inclusion in early childhood and young children's social emotional development and mental health. And our data does show, so our work with ODE, our data shows overlap between the children that providers are requesting support with through Every Child Belongs and the children who are already receiving EIECSE services. And so ODE is responsible for those services. And as we've begun collaborating with them on this, we realize that there's a need for just some basic systems in place between our two agencies to provide that clarity and structure on roles and responsibilities in our shared work. So in collaboration with the EIECSE team over at ODE, we are facilitating the design of some cross-agency governance, things like data sharing, memoranda of understanding. And so the idea is that when we have clarity on policies, procedures, practices at that state level, that really supports the coordination between Every Child Belongs and EIECSE services that is needed at the regional, local level to then best support the kids receiving those services and providers who are caring for them. And as I mentioned, with the Oregon Health Authority, so House Bill 2166 directs us to develop a plan for integrated mental and behavioral health and social and emotional supports. We are starting with creating a report in partnership with OHA on promising practices to increase access to behavioral health services for kids and families. So that will include a review of national literature on promising practices. It'll include a lot of engagement with folks at the regional level to understand what's working in their area and what we could build on in the future. And we expect that that report will be available by the end of summer of 2027. And both of these efforts with our state partners are coordinated through the Early Childhood Inclusion Initiative, where we also collaborate with Children's Institute. So I wanted to mention that as well. All right, back to Katrina to share a little bit of feedback we're starting to receive from providers.
Thanks, Lindsay. Let's go to the next slide. I have the pleasure of sharing some lovely feedback with you. So one provider shared this. This is their own words. My consultant was able to recognize when both the child and teacher were dysregulated and was able to offer a multi-prong approach. Children's behaviors have changed because of the tips and tools she shared. We are so happy to have the support and on a much quicker timeline than when we would have gotten before. And then another provider says, what I loved most is I felt empowered to do better and wasn't put down for how I was doing things, only encouraged that I could help make a difference. And when I read, especially that last one, I just sort of stop and get goosebumps because that's what this work is all about, is helping providers to feel that sense that they can make a difference and to have the tools to do it. And then we have another comment on the next slide from a different provider. This experience has reminded my staff and me of the many resources available to us and introduced a wide range of strategies beyond the ideas and techniques we regularly share with one another. It has also connected us to a network of early childhood education professionals who are deeply committed to social and emotional learning, an approach we use every day in our work with children. Most importantly, it reinforces that what we do each day truly makes a difference in the lives of the children we care for. And then one more on the next slide. This is in the words of one of the mental health consultants related to a situation she encountered. She said a childcare provider was going through an exit interview when she, the mental health consultant, arrived at the childcare site for the first visit. Upon learning why the consultant was there, the childcare provider decided to stay in her job and not quit after all. She wanted to give a chance for those services to provide the support and make a difference. And I think that is what we have. There is an appendix with additional information and slides related to the drivers of suspension and expulsion with a lot more detail, a lot of the information that Lindsay shared with you.
Wonderful. Council, do you have questions for Lindsay or Katrina or Nancy? Peter.
Yeah, great presentation. Great to get this information. I noticed that the pyramid model wasn't mentioned at all in this. And can you just talk a little bit about how this is aligned with the scaling up of the pyramid model, please?
Yeah, great question. It is, so the pyramid model, okay, I'm trying to decide where to start with answering your question. I was thinking about the conference, the setting that Lindsay and I were in yesterday, and talking with mental health consultants, and some of them described how they are utilizing pyramid practices in their mental health consultation to help providers to implement those practices in their setting. So it is, while mental health consultation isn't by itself the thing that will make the difference in implementing pyramid model, it does impact the implementation. There is DELC has additional funding or other funding streams that are going towards supporting pyramid model implementation through ELSI, the Early Learning System Initiative. And there is, I think there's continued work that we will do as part of the collaboration with OHA or not OHA, ODE and the Oregon Early Childhood Inclusion Initiative. But both things are moving forward.
Nice.
I don't know if you want to add to that, Lindsay.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add anecdotally, we're hearing in regions where they're really focused on pyramid model implementation that they're actually getting less ECB Connect requests because they have, they're focused on that area of prevention. And so one of our strategies within every child, within sort of the umbrella of Every Child Belongs, is to understand, how are we going to move forward with scaling up pyramid model? Because I think, it depends region to region at this point.
And just to follow up, when you say when a call comes in, um, technical assistance, one choice is technical assistance. Is that technical assistance perhaps a coach from a CCRR? Okay, to see how that would fit. Thank you.
Yeah, typically technical assistance is going to be someone who's part of the CCR&R staff. So it may be somebody who is, for example, it may be the preschool promise coach, or it could be the infant toddler coach, or it could be a quality improvement specialist. It kind of depends on the nature of the situation and whether the program is already connected to someone, to a particular service provider. One of the consultants yesterday described how she was working with the preschool promise coach, and the coach was working to coach on certain things, and she was working on kind of tailoring the supports for the individual child that was at risk of being excluded.
Nice, thank you.
If I can add just a little bit more information to that, Peter. So Arumhat has a slide that answers directly to your question, how IEC MHC supports the pyramid model. So the pyramid model has all these target, tertiary, and universal levels, and a mental health consultant exactly go behind the scenes and facilitate these systematic factors, talking to teachers, talking to families, talking to directors, getting resources from communities, and getting all the ducks in a row. So they actually really do these kind of systematic collaborations. And I wish Arumhat is here, and then they can tell you more about it.
Thank you.
Robin.
Good morning. I'm so glad to hear updates. I know we've all been, covering this for the last couple of years, the development and implementation. So congratulations on how far you've come and all of the successes that you've had. I have a few different things I might pause between. So I'm always interested in geography. And so when you talked about the 300 plus calls, I know that the phases will probably have a lot to do with where you're seeing the uptake, but are you seeing currently any geographic differences, or is it more challenging in rural or frontier communities? You already correlated it to like maybe where there's more training, there's less need, but is there anything else that you would share about the geography difference?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to follow up too, Robin, with a little bit more detailed. We have data that breaks down by region how many requests that we've received. So I think part of it depends on how many providers are in the region. Regions with fewer providers have fewer requests. And then the phases, regions in early phases have more requests, but we've actually seen it's evened out a little bit actually as we've gone through the phases. I don't know, what else would you say, Katrina, about takeaways? I feel like it's preliminary data, so it's hard to really make conclusions from it at this point. Actually, the other thing I'll say, Robin, is that part of our preliminary program evaluation we're doing over the next year is going to examine kind of differences in Every Child Belongs implementation across 5 different regions, which will give us some insight into how just differences in how the system is set up in that region is affecting, providers in that area and how services are rolled out. So that'll be really interesting to see.
That's great. That gets to one of my other questions about evaluation and what you're tracking on and all of that. So I appreciate that. I also was kind of curious, it was sort of anecdotally, Delk or the field, we were worried about, Robin was, and I think others were too, worried about that deadline, that July deadline. And so have you heard anything from the field about people worried and leaving the field? Have you seen a decrease in or people stepping out of the field because of it? Or is that early rumblings that we heard not coming to fruition?
I mean, we've definitely heard concern. I wouldn't say that we've heard about people leaving the field. We want to make sure we've been really focused on communicating about Every Child Belongs as supportive, preventative services as a way to help providers prepare for that July 1 date. And so that's sort of one of the ways that we're addressing that, is just making sure that they know that Every Child Belongs is really meant to be a support. We want them to reach out. We want them to reach out early. ECB Connect and the prevention services aren't, an enforcement mechanism. They're really a way to make sure providers are getting the support they need.
I have one more question. But Katrina, you want to?
Yeah, can I add to that? There is, so one of the phase 3 regions, when phase 3 launched, they didn't initially get any requests. And they're like, we're here, we're standing by, we're ready to work. So what they did is they ended up traveling around their region. This is a more rural region, but traveling around the region, meeting with individual providers, and providers would tell them, like, this sounds great, we will make a request when we have to. So sort of like after the July 1st or after the September 1st timeline. And like then, so this region didn't stop their outreach. They kept going. And the last time that I looked, they had 3 requests, which is not a lot, but for the size of the region and the number of early learning and care programs in that region, it's not bad. So I think there is some impact with the July 1st date, but it's hard to tell exactly what that is.
Thank you. That's helpful. And then I promise, and I'll let others have questions, and I will hold them rest in mind. But I appreciated your slide about partnering with ODE. Coordination with the ECSCs is critical for this, and then the partnership with OHA. And I had a question and a comment, and maybe Eric might have some ideas too. So I'm going to talk about CCO's incentive metric. But I know we were also concerned that when there would be a need to refer the child to behavioral health therapy in town, that we might not have the capacity, the training, and the workforce to be ready. I'm curious how that's looking. And if, you talked about doing a report, I think, and bringing some things back. But the social emotional incentive metric is literally about serving that birth to 5 in that capacity. So I keep putting them next to each other because they're connected. But I don't know, from a CCO's perspective, Eric, like, how would you view this work? It's literally feeding into the community referrals, and is there any more to be done to coordinate that effort more so that there is the capacity in community?
I think from the CCOs that we're engaged in, which are, luckily in areas, I think there's more capacity in other places, still not enough. But I think we really do rely on those folks being there to feed the pipeline. We've not, I've not heard specific issues with this from our folks. I think we still struggle in meeting the metric, but I think that's because there's just an overall sort of dearth of the folks that we need to refer to. And we're having a conversation with OHA currently about who's really responsible for building that workforce. I think they're looking for us to meet the outcomes. We aren't necessarily funded to meet the outcomes and pay for the services, right? Because the payment for services is based on historic utilization, right? So how do you have the energy and resources to build up that access like we did for overall, like talk therapy, right? The state raised rates 30% and invested $1 billion for primarily adult psychotherapy. There hasn't been that same kind of energy and effort in the children's system. That may be the next step we need to take, is to get that kind of attention at the governor's level and the legislature to say, look, we've identified higher acuity behavioral health as sort of one of the next things in the BH system. So how do we get sort of the base sort of early childhood behavioral health as a part of that conversation. Unfortunately, we've got to balance that because the funds are less now than they were even last year. But I think that's a conversation that I don't believe is happening. Isn't anybody we're talking to that's making budget decisions at the state. But I think if that were a conversation to happen, we'd be all for that. It would put extra pressure on the hospitals because I think they've got the loudest voice, and they're setting a lot of the agenda where any additional resources or funding is going. So that's going to the highest acuity to take folks out of the ER. People who are getting care, it's not the right setting, but it's something. I'd rather spend new resources on getting people just the most basics like we're talking about.
Thank you, Eric.
If I can chime in to offer a little bit perspective. So there is no reason that why mental health consultants cannot work together if a family and child is also receiving clinical treatment. That does also happen. So when that does happen, then we can also expect to see a synergy effect that maybe not only the children's symptoms might be decreasing, but also the overall family functioning can also be improving. So that is something that we also expect to see with this Every Child Belongs program.
Peg.
First of all, thank you very much for building a really complex system. I remember when we first looked at this a few years ago, it seemed untenable. So thank you for that. A couple of questions. I have a particular interest in children with special needs. Do you have some idea of the percentage of referrals you're getting or requests for service on kids that maybe are falling in or are already receiving services from ECSE?
Yes, we do have information about that. I don't have it in front of me right now. We can pull it up and share it with you. It's something like 27-ish% of children that providers request support with through Every Child Belongs are already receiving some type of other service. And of that 27%, it's about half that are receiving EIECSC. I think that data is accurate. So that's how we're understanding the overlap right now.
Got it. Thank you. And what do you see? I know you talked about the last group that got implemented was their referrals were quite low. What do you see as the capacity that because I suspect as this becomes more accepted and people realize, I mean, you're getting lots of positive feedback from providers and so forth, that the request for referrals may actually go up. And as consultants become more involved and do some follow-up, I realize they're not therapists. They're not gonna, or they're not doing direct therapy with the child, but it's going to take some time. Is there capacity to continue with that service, or are we going to need more mental health therapists to infant mental health therapists to sort of carry out that program successfully?
Yeah, I do think that we're going to need more. I think we're already seeing, so in some regions, where there's only one or two mental health consultants, we're already seeing that, folks are starting to be at capacity. We really want to make sure that every provider who reaches out for support receives some type of support. So we've been working with the regions to just, make sure it gets assigned to a support specialist, and that might be technical assistance instead of mental health consultants if the mental health consultant's caseload is full. And we're gathering data on on that sort of like gap, right? So we're building in a mechanism to say, okay, how many cases did you receive where you might have liked to assign this to mental health consultation, but there wasn't a mental health consultant available, so you assigned it elsewhere. And so that's where we'll be able to really get a good sense of where the gap in capacity is.
Great, thank you. And one other thing, I know that, and I really appreciate your recognition of trauma and the effects of trauma on children and their behavior. I think one of the other really positive things, and one of the things we want to include in training for providers, are the positive childhood experiences, because as you were saying, kids spend so much time in their early childhood care and education that can be a big determiner of those positive experiences. Thanks.
Subin.
Hi. I'm just I wanted to harmonize with Lindsay and Katrina and Nancy and sing some different notes, but in concert. What Peg, you hit it on the head. Like I suspected or anticipated that this update would feel comforting to the council, given that this has been a really kind of gigantic, monumental effort to get it to the place where it is now. And I do feel like the program is just in a so much better place than kind of what how people might have felt in earlier updates. One of the things that I wanted to share to add some more color is the advisory council. The last time we had an update, we were talking about how the advisory council was expanding and shifting and growing. The advisory council has taken on a number of new members. It's a much larger group now with a lot of diverse perspective on there, including from families, from providers, from regional agencies, all different geographic regions represented. And so the conversations are really attuned. And I think they're going really well. They are rich conversations, but it doesn't feel circular. Like it does feel like we're making decisions and shaping the program. And so I think it feels good for everyone that's involved there. I would also say that because of those conversations, from some of our previous meetings, we've heard some public testimony from folks who were very concerned about Every Child Belongs. And they weren't wrong in saying that primarily what people are receiving is consultation, right? And that's kind of the biggest thrust of the program here. And they're not wrong to say that and to be concerned about that. But within the scope of that, we've had some really thoughtful implementation of how the licensing division is going to be operating. So, for example, it's less of an emphasis on I forget the licensing terminology, but making bad marks on programs and shutting them down and things like that, and more about, okay, how can we support and how can we encourage people in the right directions. And the other thing that I just want to be clear-eyed around, I mean, yes, we heard a lot of positive updates today, but there are still some things that, need some addressing, right? And I think Lindsay and Katrina touched on them. I think we would have liked to have made bigger progress in terms of the coordination with ODE and OHA on EIECSE and, working with the healthcare system and things like that. But we know that work is in front of us, right? The inroads are happening. The other thing that Lindsay just mentioned is that it's amazing that the regional service providers fulfilled the capacity that they did in the time that they had. It is truly astounding. And we've all known as a council that the funding amount for this program was not going to cover the need across all the different regions. And so there is more advocacy to be done. There is more educating of our legislators to be done. And we know that the next 2 biennia are, we're not anticipating big growth, right? And so, so those are some things that are just top of mind for me. And yeah, I just wanted to add to what was being shared.
Wonderful. And we are about to hear from licensing, by the way, about the rules that Subin had just alluded to. Is there any other questions for this group before we move into that discussion?
I don't have any questions. I just want to add, touch on what Sobin already built upon. I also used to do 50 state policy analyses. So I'm pretty aware of, in terms of infant early childhood mental health consultation, where does Oregon stand compared to all the other 49 states plus DC? We're not doing the best, but we're also not doing the worst. And overall, I would say that I'm very proud. I feel like I'm coming from Oregon and being a part of an effort supporting the development of Every Child Belongs program in the state.
Peter.
Yes, thanks. Ben Cannon had mentioned the community college program for mental health technicians, and I'm not aware of what a mental health technician is. Is that position going to fill a role in the infant in early childhood mental health world?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer. I think I will need to look into more about what is the mental health technician program.
Yeah.
The current mental health consultation workforce is made up of people, a mix of people. So some of the consultants come with a background with a degree in mental health.
Okay.
Some come with a background in early education. So those that come with a background in early education are really diving deep in training with ORIMHA around mental health competencies and philosophies. Those that come from a mental health background and haven't had prior early learning experience are then being oriented to what does it mean to work and consult in an early learning environment. So it's really a big lift for ORIMHA because they are providing training on both sides of that. But I would be curious to look into the mental health technician, whether it is how it relates to early childhood and how it relates to mental health competencies.
Nancy, I'm not referring. Thank you, Nancy, from the chat there. I'm not referring to the Balmer Institute's program. I'm pretty clear on what that is, and I think that's great. The more people we get into the workforce, but my understanding is Balmer's more focused on K-12, and I was just intrigued that if there's a 2-year credential program that would add to the workforce in early childhood, mental health, behavior health, I would love to see what it is and see if we could expand it.
Do you happen to know which college or university?
It's Oregon Coast Community College.
We'll do some digging.
Other questions or reflections? I think I just want to echo, I think when we started talking about this was right after I joined the council, and I just thought, how are they going to pull this off? It seemed like such a monumental task, and it is really, I've been pleasantly surprised by the evolution. So kudos to you all and the entire team for doing that. And then I also, I appreciated the breakdown of what are the drivers that this program is addressing. And I think for the council to also remember the ones that it's not addressing, and that those are still needs in the system that we and our agency partners, I think, need to obviously continue to focus on as well. And how do we ensure that this program has the resources it needs in the upcoming legislative session to do the great work that you're doing, and also to make sure that there's enough people in all of these places to help our providers on the ground. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for the update. It was wonderful. And if there are no final questions on this one, I think we'll move directly into rulemaking. Gabby, do you want to give just a high-level overview for the council of what to expect, and then we can dive into with licensing on this piece for them?
Yeah, so council, we have two presentations and then two actions to vote on this morning. So we'll kick things off with licensing to really just kind of keep that segue into the Every Child Belongs program or suspension expulsion prevention. And then we will have Dana Young join to share and get a vote on the preschool promise updated rules. So two votes today, and with that, I will pass it off to the CCLD team. I think it's Abby, and we'll get your slides up, Abby.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, good morning or almost afternoon, Chair Freer Campbell and fellow council members. My name is Abby Strom, and I am a policy analyst with the Child Care Licensing Division. And I'm here along with Alicia Gardner, and then also Katrina Miller will be coming back on to present the final rule language for vote related to suspension and expulsion prevention. We will provide a summary of what activities have happened since we were last here to present. Also summarize the feedback that we received during our engagement activities. And then we'll conclude with next steps and what's going to happen for implementation of the new rules if they're adopted. Next slide. Thank you. So this is our third and final presentation on the suspension and expulsion prevention rules. As a reminder, engagement around these rules began in fall of 2025, where we were speaking with community around policy concepts, and then those policy concepts were used to draft the rules. And in March, Alicia presented on the draft rules and presented the content. And since then, we've had several engagement opportunities that I will go into further depth on the next couple of slides. And then if the rules are adopted today, they will not take effect until September 1 of 2026. And then we will use those summer months to really develop supports and resources for childcare providers as they look to implement the new requirements. Next slide. So what have we done since March? We've had a lot of public engagement. We held two rulemaking advisory committee meetings and a public hearing and a public comment period. We received a significant amount of feedback. There's a very, very passionate group of community members and individuals who provided us with a lot of feedback to work through. We also, I just wanted to mention that we did at those RAC meetings, both the facility rules for childcare facilities were covered, as well as the suspension and expulsion prevention program rules that Katrina will speak to later on. So after we completed our public engagement, we also reviewed feedback that we got from DELC staff. We opened the rules up for feedback both from CCLD staff as well as other staff across the agency who want to make recommendations on that. Afterwards, we made amendments where possible to really clarify the intent of the rules. And then we also had to complete some additional consultation with the Department of Justice on some of the suggested amendments. Okay, next slide. So the next two slides are the list of all of the people that participated in the RAC. We had, again, very robust conversation at the meetings. One was focused on certified family and registered family childcare, and the other was focused on certified center and certified outdoor nature-based childcare programs. And as a reminder, we are not adopting rules or proposing rules for adoption for certified school-age programs. There was representation from across the state, including Eastern and Coastal Oregon. We had folks that were representing families of young children, childcare providers, mental health consultants, as well as members of the Every Child Belongs Advisory Committee were also there as well. And then we'll just go to the next slide. So yes, we had about 30 folks that contributed to the RAC. Okay, next slide. So the following slides will review the changes that we are proposing from the draft rules. The slides will provide a summary of the changes that were made. And just so the council knows, included in the packet is a broader summary of feedback and agency response. So if you would like to review that, it is available to you. But this presentation today will focus primarily on where we did make changes to the rules. And as a reminder, the changes you will see today will be applied to, at least for the child care facility rules, will be applied to all 4 types of care. So to begin, we'll start with the changes that we made in definitions. We did modify the definition of Every Child Belongs to clarify the intent of the program. We've received feedback that the original draft definition of Every Child Belongs used the word initiative. And it was really confusing because they didn't know, like, am I supposed to contact an initiative? So we did change the word initiative to program to make it easier to understand for childcare providers. Also in the draft, we had proposed definitions of both suspension and expulsion. These 2 definitions have been removed from the final draft and replaced with an intent-based statement in the policy section, which we'll see on another slide. It's really best practice that we not define a term that we don't actually use in the rules themselves. So the only time that suspension and expulsion are used within the rule set is in the name of the policy that they're required to create. So that is why, and it also really further delineates what the limitations that DELC has in terms of enforcement. So since we can't currently enforce the prohibition on suspension and expulsion itself, it is better that we do not define it within our facility rule sets. We also received feedback during our public feedback that there were some concerns about the definitions themselves. So they have been removed. One additional thing we heard from public feedback was we have a definition of potential expulsion. And there was feedback to align the language with what's in statute. So we did add the word facing. So now the definition is to facing potential expulsion. And it really emphasizes the proactive approach that we are looking to do. In terms of care of children with specific needs, this section was originally updated to include compliance with suspension and expulsion prevention. I'm sorry, wrong one. Care of children with specific needs is about when a written plan of care is needed for a specific child that has specific needs. We had amended this section to remove all the specific requirements that must be in the plan of care, just recognizing that each plan of care is unique to each child. And then we also modified who develops the plan and referenced a qualified professional. And the feedback we received was that we needed a definition of qualified professional because they weren't exactly sure who that meant. So we did add a definition of qualified professional, which includes early intervention specialists, infant and early childhood mental health consultants, physicians, and then any similarly qualified professionals that would be developing a plan of care for a child with specific needs. We also added that family and provider collaboration in the development of this plan, as it was noted during our public engagement that was a missing component of this rule. Okay, next. So under the general policies section, this particular part of this rule was about an assessment that occurs when a child with specific needs enters the program. We received feedback that the focus seemed to be about the program conducting an assessment of the child versus the facility looking at its physical environment or its policies and procedures that they may need to adapt to support that child in care. So we adjusted this rule to use more plain language to hopefully increase the understanding. And it's also been modified to focus the assessment on the program's ability to meet the child's specific needs versus the program completing an individual assessment on that child. Because the assumption is that the assessment has already occurred, there is an identified specific need, and it's just more about how the program is supporting that child while they're in care. Additionally, we added a rule that clarifies that the requirements within this section do not displace a program's requirement to comply with ADA or other civil rights laws. We did hear in public engagement that there was concern that it would conflict with ADA, so we've just clarified that in rule. In addition to in the physical restraint section, we have one of the indicators of facing potential expulsion is when physical restraint is used on a child more than once. The feedback we received, and which is a trigger to contact Every Child Belongs when a child is facing potential expulsion. The feedback we received is that there was no timeline for when providers would be required to contact Every Child Belongs. And there were concerns because physical restraint is traumatic for both the caregiver and the child as well. So we've amended this rule that providers must contact Every Child Belongs by 5 p.m. the next business day, which really aligns with our other notification requirements within rule. Next slide. So for the suspension and expulsion prevention section itself, under the policies, this is where we've added that intent-based statement. So we've removed the definition of suspension and expulsion and just added that the intent of the suspension and expulsion prevention policy is to ensure that young children are supported to remain in care. So really aligning with the philosophy and outcomes of Every Child Belongs, supporting providers, supporting children in care. We have also, there were a couple minor corrections to rules within this section. So we've modified, or we have a requirement that talks about providers need to state when they would be communicating with families in regards to concerns that they have in the classroom. And it used to say, or the original rule said communications about ability and development and behaviors. And there were concerns that having the words ability and development within this is seen as a negative. Like we didn't want development or ability to be seen as a negative. So we really focused on the feedback was to focus more on behavior and less on a child's ability or development. So those have been removed. And then we've also added that providers must, in terms of documentation requirements, we used to just say that they needed to document the strategies that they were using to support a specific child. And some of the feedback we received was that we should add the word supports as well. So that is now in there as well. And then on the use of temporary safety-based interventions, and as a reminder, a temporary safety-based intervention is can be used when a child exhibits behavior that is a severe safety threat. So this is when a program may have a child not in care with the intent of the child returning to care after they've received or after supports are in place to maintain that child's safety and the safety of other children. So there were no rule changes to the temporary safety-based intervention itself, but we did add a parent notification requirement to this section so that if the program is implementing a temporary safety-based intervention, they're notifying the parent or another emergency contact immediately. And this also aligns with our other notification rules. Okay, now I'm going to pass it off to Katrina. Well, do we want to do questions now if there are questions, or wait till after Katrina goes?
I think we could, if there are any questions, maybe pop them in right now and then we'll move on to Katrina.
Thank you.
Any questions so far, folks? I think you've blown us away, Abby. Okay, Katrina, you're up.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the next slide. So in these rules, these are limited to the definitions section of the rules that define Every Child Belongs. So as Abby said, so we were using the same definition in the licensing rules as in the Every Child Belongs prevention program rules, the same definition of what Every Child Belongs is. I will say the word, I don't think Abby mentioned this, the word timely that we used in the original definition created concern among providers that they would not receive services in a timely manner. And although our intent is to provide services in a timely manner, somehow the word itself was creating concern that the opposite would be the case. And so we elected to remove the word timely. The original phrasing was timely and responsive, and we decided to lean on the word responsive, believing that responsive also includes timely. But to remove that one word that seemed to be raising questions. We modified the definition of planned transition to state that the early learning and care program who is receiving the child, the program that the child is transitioning to, may be involved when appropriate in the development of the transition plan. This was feedback that came from the Rules Advisory Committee. There was a suggestion that the receiving program be required to be a participant, and we can't require it. There are potential concerns with confidentiality or parent consent for that. But we added the suggestion here that they may be involved. Next slide, please. We also made a couple of other changes based on additional consultation with DOJ or other feedback. So we modified the definition of early childhood care and education program, specifically point B, to define what we mean by state public funding. And it is state public funding for early learning and care services in which a child could face potential expulsion. For example, there are some public funding services that are used for literacy or for parent and me groups where a child is unlikely to face expulsion, but it's still public funding. So we just wanted to provide clarification on the focus of the public funding here. We also modified the definition of soft expulsion to add the clause due to a child's ability, specialized needs, or behavior. This aligns with, so Abby described how they removed the suspension and expulsion definitions from the licensing rules. We are keeping those in the program rules, the prevention program rules. And we are keeping the phrase due to a child's ability, specialized needs, or behavior. There was confusion around what does ability mean? Does ability mean that we're actually saying it's okay to exclude children based on their ability or disability status? And no, we're actually trying to say the opposite. So there may be some additional messaging or communication that we can do to help clarify that, but we wanted to keep that in because we know that that children with disabilities do get suspended and expelled at rates higher than their typically developing peers. But in the process, we realized that the definition of soft expulsion did not have that clause, where we did have that in suspension, expulsion, and exclusionary practices. So we wanted to add that clause to align with the other definitions and also to differentiate soft expulsion from other reasons that a family may withdraw their child from a program. And that's, I think, back to Abby now. I just had those two slides.
So, in terms of our next steps and timelines, with adoption today, again, the rules will not take effect, including the ones that Katrina discussed until September 1st. And then so over the summer, we plan to do a lot of development of provider resources and then also updating any existing resources that might need to be altered based on the new rules. One thing we are doing that is slightly different than what we've done with other rule adoptions is that we are developing resources or supports to help support compliance with the rules as how they're written, but we're also partnering with other DELC divisions, I'm so sorry, to develop and gather together resources for providers that want to go further or want to learn more. So we will be putting together kind of a library of resources for providers to access, and if they choose. And then we were just going to support providers in preparation for the new rules over the summer as well, training licensing specialists on how to talk to providers about the new rules and making sure that those resources are available to them to share. I'm so sorry. And then we will, as always, provide technical assistance. So for technical assistance in CCLD land, that's just ensuring that providers have the resources they need to be in compliance with the rules. So, and then as the rules are new, we will continue to provide support for providers in those early months after adoption to really support understanding and compliance with the new rules. So I believe that is all for me. And I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna mute.
I think I skipped over any opportunity for questions too about the program definition. So I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
We'll definitely take you up on that. Council, any questions for Katrina or Abby?
Oh,
Subin.
This is just a comment that the advisory council has Abby and Alicia have come at, I want to say 3, 4, maybe 5 times in the last year or so. So the advisory council has looked at this whole process step by step all the way through.
Wonderful. I really also appreciated the robust RAC. That was wonderful to see that so many providers participated from all over the state. So job well done in making sure that those were, I think, really robust feedback mechanisms for this. Any other questions or reflections? If not, I think we would, Gabby, do you want to put up motion language?
Ready for the motion. And Subin, I know you were going to hop off at 12, so I just want to confirm if you'll be here for this vote. Okay, perfect.
I'm good.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share the motion to adopt. Council, I do just want to preface it looks a little scary. We do not have to cite all of the rule numbers, but we are proposing to adopt rule sets from 5 different divisions. So it does just look like a bit of language. The only motion that you have to recite is what I have highlighted here in blue. So just sharing that to see if we have a volunteer to carry this motion.
Who's brave?
I'll be brave.
Go for it, Subin.
I move to adopt the proposed permanent rule language amendments dated June 24th, 2026 that adopt amendments to Oregon administrative rules as listed on the council action request for the following rule set divisions: Certified Family Childcare Homes, Division 360, Registered Family Childcare Homes, Division 210, Certified Childcare Center, Division 305, Certified Outdoor Nature-Based, Division 320, Early Childhood Suspension and Expulsion Prevention Program, Division 580.
Beautifully done. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Gabby, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Chair Farrar Campbell,
Yes.
Katie Brooks,
Yes.
Peter Buckley,
Yes.
Robin Hill Dunbar.
Yes.
Eric Hunter had to drop off, so he is excused from this vote. Dr. Peg Miller.
Yes.
Subin O.
Yes.
Ruby is also excused from this vote, and Marie Simons.
Yes.
Perfect.
Sounds like the rules are passed. Thank you all so much for the work on that. And then we'll move in next to Dana for the preschool promise. And we've already heard the sort of first preview of this, but Dana, I'll turn it over to you and we can go from there.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dana Young. I'm the Preschool Promise Program Manager here for the department. So we'll go ahead and get started with our rules revision. As you may remember, I was here during the last meeting, just providing you with an overview. We'll go ahead and do an overview and just, share with you what we've done, since I last came to present to you. So next slide. Just a little bit of background of Preschool Promise without going too in-depth. Preschool Promise, publicly funded program where we serve across 36 counties across the state. We really are focused on providing services to children and families who are at or below the 200% of the poverty level. There are some regions of the state where we do go above the income level if that child or family is in an area with low access to care. My apologies. Next slide. Okay, and the need for rulemaking. As we continue working with our coordinated enrollment system, we are really trying to go ahead and, my apologies, I need to let my pups out. Be right back. So sorry.
Not a problem at all. We all have that.
Sorry about that. Okay, so the need for rulemaking, we are really making a big effort to reduce the burden on families when they go and apply for preschool promise. So doing some alignment with other publicly funded programs. And then also, as we became, our own department, our rules needed a lot of cleanup to go ahead and ensure that we were very transparent with the public as far as like who was overseeing the program. So we really wanted to go ahead and focus on improving that experience and then also provide clarity over the oversight of preschool promise and alignment. Next slide. We had our rules advisory on May the 13th. As you can see, we had, members from all regions of the state. That was it was a really nice meeting to go ahead and have and also hear different perspectives. We have some families, we have some members of our early learning hubs, which play a big role in our preschool promise enrollment. So that was really, really good. We had a nice robust group there. Next slide. We are doing some changes to all of the rules, and I want to mention the reason why is because we're doing a lot of cleanup. So in many of the rules, it had, for example, like the work division. So we needed to go ahead and change it to department. So that's why you're seeing all of them, but you're really going to see major changes on the child and family eligibility, a waiver application, and a few preschool promise provider eligibility, just to go ahead and do that. So you just want to go ahead and preface. It looks like we're revamping everything, but not really. We're just doing a lot of cleanup. Next slide. And this is just, you have this information. It's just taking you to a link of all the different, documents that were submitted to the Secretary of State. Next slide there. Alrighty, so I'll go ahead and take you through each of the rules and just give you a really high level summary, right? Since we covered this information last time. With our definitions, we are doing some changes to go ahead and ensure that, as I talk about alignment, we also realized that we needed to also be in alignment with other offices within the department and making sure that we have the right definition. So we are updating the definition for Spark and federally recognized tribes in Oregon. And then also we are removing that the definition for fiscal agent, as fiscal agent doesn't really, align with the way that we're doing implementation. So those are the big three changes here on 005. Next slide. And then here's where you're going to see the big, a lot of changes here to really go off of like, how do we enhance that experience for families wanting to apply? So for our child and family eligibility, which is 0010, we are adding some, I am so sorry. We are adding some categorically eligible populations to be in alignment with Oregon prenatal to kindergarten. That's one thing that we're doing. And then really adding a little bit more clarity on that. If we can go to the next slide. As you may be aware of, we currently have a temporary rule in place, and that is for to go ahead and really use the family's like income for housing, right? We know that housing is really high. So in an effort to be in alignment with OPK, we decided to go ahead and adopt some of the same processes where there are going to be circumstances where our eligibility specialists are able to go ahead and use housing income and be able to deduct that from the family's overall income. So this is currently a temporary rule. Next slide. And then here's where we're seeing, the big bulk of the changes for this set of rulemaking. We are adding some categorically eligible populations. What does that mean? When we're talking about categorically eligible, it's really focused that families in these groups do not have to provide proof of income, right? Because we've already checked that the program that they belong to is at or below the 200% of the poverty level. So then we're able to go ahead and really reduce the burden and not have to have the family now, once again, go ahead and submit a lot of documentation to be approved for the program. In addition to that, once again, in alignment, right? Many of our preschool promise grantees are also dual funded programs. So that means that they are providing services, they're funded by OPK and then they're funded by PSP. So that also creates a lot of burden for those eligibility specialists to be able to have like different requirements. So we are saying here that children who are children experiencing homelessness as defined by the McKinney-Vento should be categorically eligible. Children who meet the definition of foster child, that one was already there. So we're not doing anything with that. And then we're also saying the families who are receiving employment related daycare, families enroll in the Oregon Health Plan, families enroll in WIC, SNAP, SSI, TANF, and then also families of children who are members of a federally recognized tribe are eligible for preschool promise, categorically eligible, so they don't have to submit additional documentation. This is a change that we had from the last time through feedback that we received from that RAT meeting. We did make a change. Initially, G actually said families or children who are members of the 9 recognized tribes in Oregon. That has now changed to be in alignment with other publicly funded programs to say to members of any federally recognized tribe. So just want to point that out. Next slide. Provider eligibility. Once again, just just making sure that we use the same consistent terminology across that section of 0025. Next slide. In program requirements here, we did, as we continue to go ahead and expand our, we grant with different tribes across the state. We really wanted to go ahead and make sure that we mention here that while they are participants of Preschool Promise that were really trying to go ahead and honor their language and their culture. So we felt that it was necessary for us to be very transparent about that. That just because they're Preschool Promise doesn't mean that now they have to go ahead and adopt a different way of providing a high quality preschool. So we made some changes on that. Next slide. Administration, once again, this one's, we needed to go ahead and update the language, to Department of Early Learning and Care because they had a previous old language. Next slide. Monitoring the same. We are updating the terminology to go ahead and align with our transition now that we are the Department of Early Learning and Care. Next slide. Waiver process. This one did experience a little bit of a change. Two big changes here. Initially, the rule stated that a Preschool Promise grantee can only request a waiver during the first years of participation in the program. We have removed that with our mixed delivery. There's just different waivers, different situations. So that language was removed to be able to go ahead and align with our mixed delivery model and also be able to respond that if it's an emergency or something changed with the program, and they have been with Preschool Promise for a long time, that we are able to go ahead and work with those grantees given the investment that we have made to them. I think as we're looking at Preschool Promise, some of our grantees have been with us for 10 years, right? So, and things change. People are growing and people are doing different things. Next slide. Reporting, once again, we're updating the terminology to DELC. Next slide. And fiscal agent, this one is one that we're removing because it doesn't align with our current implementation. Our grantees are able to go ahead and subcontract, so we don't need technically this rule in order for us to go ahead and be able to do that. And the next slide. Already, so this is just a brief overview of the input that we receive on the advisory group, right? It's really making sure, especially one thing that we heard is that as we are trying to go ahead and reduce the burden for our children, for our families wanting to apply and having to go ahead and provide additional income, is go ahead and ensure that we are having a strong collaboration with OPK and Head Start to make sure that all slots are full, right? That it doesn't create a competition. So that is continuous work that we're doing with, through a coordinated enrollment system and process and more collaboration at the local level. Next slide. And then, just some feedback here on that clarification for waivers. I think overall, it was well received there. Next slide. So what is our timeline? We had public comment. Our public comment ended on June the 5th, and we received no public comment on that. So that was good. Nobody, everybody seems to be in alignment with the different changes that we're wanting to make. And then, I had come and presented here on May the 27th. We are here June 24th, looking for you to adopt this rule so they can become effective August 1st. Any questions?
Any questions for Dana? I would just say that I understand the comment about the competition, but I think another way that I think of that is parent choice, right? And so if we're truly committed to allowing all families to choose the provider that best meets their needs, sometimes that means families may decide that Preschool Promise is a better option for them for a variety of reasons, and they should be able to make that choice. So I appreciate that. And then I also think we started this conversation with Jonna Timms and talking about the things that we can do internally that sort of smooths some of these systems for families. And I think you've highlighted some of those ways that bringing these programs into alignment really does make it easier for the providers and the families to access them. and community. So I appreciate that work and just wanted to call that out. Other questions or reflections before we move into motions? If not, Gabby, can you bring up the motion language, please?
Yes, and this one's even shorter than the first one. So just bringing the motion up to see which council member would like to carry this motion.
Do we have a volunteer?
I'll do it. I move to adopt the proposed permanent rule language amendments dated June 24th, 2026 that adopt amendments to Oregon administrative rules as listed on the council action request for the preschool promise program rule set amendments.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Gabby, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Chair Farrar Campbell,
Yes.
Katie Brooks,
Yes.
Peter Buckley,
Yes.
Robin Hill Dunbar,
Yes.
Eric Hunter is excused, Peg Miller,
Yes.
Subin O,
Yes.
Ruby Ramirez is excused, and Marie Simons.
Yes.
Perfect. The motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dana, for bringing it to us and for all your work.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Wonderful. All right, Council, it is 12:20 and we have reached the end of our agenda. Just a couple of scheduling notes. We are taking a few months off, so we are planning to reconvene our regular meetings in September. And I mentioned previously in our meeting that we have our annual retreat scheduled for October. Some more details as Gabby and I and team start getting that a little bit more firmed up and planned, but that expect to see more details there. Is there anything anybody would like to raise for the good of the order before we adjourn?
I do appreciate our meetings being briefer, and I really do like it when we take a little break, even if after 2 hours, it's like, I hate to miss anything. There was so much information that I didn't want to take a bio break, but I feel like we need that. And then I had a little bit of questions around, and maybe this is just a status update. Where is the council in terms of support from? I know we are technically not a build state anymore, but Carrie and how's Harriet supporting? Where are we at in terms of support for the council right now?
Right now we're actually contracted with Harriet through December using PDG funding to support us with Raise Up Oregon and council work. And we're just moving forward a short 6-month membership with Build through PDG, but we're actually targeting their current skill set around the use of data and community engagement to help the hubs with redeveloping and launching a community assessment. So that work is funded from now till December as well, given that the PDG money is for 1 year.
That's great. Thank you. And then I was thinking about the early learning hubs and and I know, Peter, you would have shared a lot before about how we need to get engaged. And we can put it on our retreat list of things, but I just haven't heard about our engagement with the early learning hubs. I missed the gathering that was in Pendleton in the spring. So maybe it's just me that's out of the loop, but I just want to be supportive. There was one more thing, but I already forgot it.
Shoot me an email if you do what I do, and then as soon as you hang up, remember.
I will do that. Thank you.
Wonderful. And yes, we will try to build bio breaks in for sure. Other things for the good of the order?
I just want to say, Liz, you've been a fantastic chair, and you've done such a tremendous job this year, and just thank you.
Oh, shucks. You're making me blush over here, Subin. Thank you for that. Robin, did you have one? Did you remember?
I remembered. I will definitely echo that, Liz. it's the RUI Act. So I often refer to how RUI Act is connected to Early Learning Council, and I feel less connected to what I think they meet monthly. I know we used to have more of a like every director gives an update, but I wonder if we could have like in the future an update on the topics RUI Act is working on that's related to Early Learning Council. It would just seem like it would tether all the pieces together.
Yeah, and great question, Robin. Right now, we've been very heavy in the updates to Raise Up Oregon with the PDG funds that we got. So that's really just been at the focus of most of our meetings. I can actually give folks an update on that. Ruect and I have been connecting over the last several months. I actually just kicked off external engagement yesterday to get feedback on the draft proposals with the CCR&Rs. I'm going to work on scheduling some time with the hubs as well and some of our other external partners. So, an update on that should come to the council once we reconvene in September so that you all can take a look at those edits and see what community had to say.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Anything more for the good of the order? If not, last call. It is 12:25 and I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all and we'll see you in September.